This is LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anjana. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 7, Part 1. Descend from heaven, Urania, by that name if rightly thou art called, whose voice divine following above the Olympian hill I soar, above the flight of Pegasian wing. The meaning, not the name I call, for thou, nor of the Muses nine, nor on the top of old Olympus dwell'st, but heavenly born, before the hills appeared, or fountain flowed, thou with eternal wisdom didst converse, wisdom thy sister, and with her didst play in presence of thy mighty Father, pleased with thy celestial song. Upled by thee into the heaven of heavens I have presumed, an earthly guest, and drawn imperial air thy tempering. With like safety guided down, return me to my native element, less from this flying steed unreined, as once Bellerophon, though from a lower clime, dismounted, in the Aleian field I fall, erroneous there to wander, and forlorn. Half yet remains unsung, but narrower bound within the visible diurnal sphere, standing on earth, not wrapped above the pole, more safe I sing with mortal voice, unchanged to horse or lute, though fallen on evil days though fallen, and evil tongues. In darkness, and with dangers compass round, and solitude, yet not alone, while thou visit'st my slumbers nightly, or when morn purples the east. Still govern thou my song, Urania, and fit audience find, though few. But drive far off the barbarous dissonance of Bacchus and his revellers, the race of that wild brute that tore the Thracian bard in Rodolphe, where woods and rocks had ears to rapture, till the savage clamour drowned both heart and voice. Nor could the muse defend her son. So fail not thou, who thee implores, for thou art heavenly, she an empty dream. Say, goddess, what ensued when Raphael, the affable archangel, had forewarned Adam by dire example to beware apostasy? By what befell in heaven to those apostates, yes, the like befall in paradise to Adam or his race, charged not to touch the interdicted tree, if they transgress, and slight that sole command, so easily obeyed amid the choice of all tastes else to please their appetite, though wandering. He with his consorted Eve the story heard attentive, and was filled with admiration, and deep mused to hear of things so high and strange, things to their thoughts so unimaginable as hate in heaven, and wars so near the peace of God in bliss with such confusion. But the evil soon driven back redounded as a flood on those from whom it sprung, impossible to mix with blessedness. Whence Adam soon repealed the doubts that in his heart arose, and now led on, yet sinless, with the desire to know what nearer might concern him, how this world of heaven and earth conspicuous first began, when and whereof created, for what cause, what within Eden or without was done before his memory, as one whose drought yet scarce allayed still eyes the current stream, whose liquid murmur heard new thirst excites, proceeded thus to ask his heavenly guest. Great things, and full of wonder in our ears, far differing from this world thou hast revealed, divine interpreter, by favour sent down from the Empyrean to forewarn us timely of what might else have been our loss, unknown which human knowledge could not reach, for which to th' infinitely good we owe immortal thanks, and his admonishment receive with solemn purpose to observe immutably his sovereign will, the end of what we are. But since thou hast vouchsafed gently for our instruction to impart things above earthly thought, which yet concerned our knowing, as to highest wisdom seemed, deign to descend now lower, and relate what may no less perhaps avail us known. How first began this heaven which we behold distant so high, with moving fires adorned innumerable, and this which yields or fills all space, the ambient air wide interfused, embracing round this florid earth. What cause moved the Creator in his holy rest through all eternity so late to build in chaos? And the work begun, how soon absolve, if unforbid thou mayest unfold what we, not to explore the secrets ask of his eternal empire, but the more to magnify his works, the more we know. And the great light of day yet wants to run much of his race though steep. Suspense in heaven held by thy voice, thy potent voice he hears, and longer will delay to hear thee tell his generation, and the rising birth of nature from the unapparent deep. Or if the star of evening and the moon haste to thy audience, night with her will bring silence, and sleep listening to thee will watch. Or we can bid his absence till thy song end, and dismiss the air the morning shine. Thus Adam his illustrious guest besought, and thus the godlike angel answered mild. This also thy request with caution asked obtain. Though to recount almighty works, what words or tongue of seraph can suffice, or heart of man suffice to comprehend? Yet what thou canst attain, which best may serve to glorify the Maker, and infer thee also happier, shall not be withheld thy hearing. Such commission from above I have received, to answer thy desire of knowledge within bounds. Beyond abstain to ask, nor let thine own inventions hope things not revealed, which the invisible King, only omniscient, hath suppressed in night, to none communicable in earth or heaven. Enough is left besides to search and know. But knowledge is as food, and needs no lesser temperance over appetite, to know in measure what the mind may well contain, oppresses else with surfeit, and soon turns wisdom to folly, as nourishment to wind. Know then, that after Lucifer from heaven, so call him brighter once amid the host of angels, than that star the stars among, fell with his flaming legions through the deep into his place, and the great sun returned victorious with his saints. The omnipotent eternal Father from his throne beheld their multitude, and to his Son thus spake. At least our envious foe hath failed, who thought all like himself rebellious, by whose aid this inaccessible high strength, the seat of Deity supreme, us dispossessed. He trusted to have seized, and into fraud drew many, whom their place knows here no more. Yet far the greater part have kept, I see, their station. Heaven yet populous retains number sufficient to possess her realms, though wide, and this high temple to frequent with ministries due and solemn rites. But lest his heart exalt him in the harm already done, to have dispeopled heaven, my damage falling deemed, I can repair that detriment, if such it be to lose self lost, and in a moment will create another world, out of one man a race of men innumerable, there to dwell, not here, till by degrees of merit raised, they open to themselves at length the way up hither, under long obedience tried, and earth be changed to heaven, and heaven to earth, one kingdom, joy and union without end. Meanwhile inhabit lax, ye powers of heaven, and thou my word begotten Son, by thee this I perform, speak thou, and be it done. My overshadowing spirit and might with thee I send along, ride forth, and bid the deep within appointed bounds be heaven and earth, boundless the deep, because I am who fill infinitude, nor vacuous the space, though I uncircumscribed myself retire, and put not forth my goodness, which is free to act or not. Necessity and chance approach not me, and what I will is fate. So spake th' Almighty, and to what he spake his word the filial Godhead gave effect. Immediate are the acts of God, more swift than time or motion, but to human ears cannot without process of speech be told. So told as earthly notion can receive. Great triumph and rejoicing was in heaven, when such was heard declared the Almighty's will. Glory they sung to the Most High, good will to future men, and in their dwellings peace. Glory to him whose just avenging ire had driven out the ungodly from his sight, and the inhabitants of the just. To him glory and praise, whose wisdom had ordained good out of evil to create, instead of spirits malign, a better race to bring into their vacant wombs, and thence diffuse his good to worlds and ages infinite. So sang the hierarchies. Meanwhile the sun on his great expedition now appeared, girt with omnipotence, with radiance crowned of majesty divine, sapience and love immense, and all his Father in him shone. About his chariot numberless were poured cherub and seraph, potentates and thrones, and virtue's winged spirits and chariots winged, from the army of God, where stand of old myriads between two brazen mountains lodged against a solemn day, harnessed at hand, celestial equipage. And now came forth spontaneous, for within them spirit lived, attendant on their Lord. Heaven open wide, her ever-during gates, harmonious sound on golden hinges moving, to let forth the King of Glory in his powerful word, and spirit coming to create new worlds. On heavenly ground they stood, and from the shore they viewed the vast immeasurable abyss, outrageous as a sea, dark, wasteful, wild, up from the bottom turned by furious winds and surging waves, as mountains to assault heaven's height, and with the center mixed the pole. Silence, ye troubled waves, and thou deep, peace, said then the omnific word, your discord end, nor stayed, but on the wings of cherubim uplifted, in paternal glory rode far into chaos and the world unborn. For chaos heard his voice. Him all his train followed in bright procession to behold creation and the wonders of his might. Then stayed the fervid wheel, and in his hand he took the golden compasses, prepared in God's eternal store, to circumscribe this universe and all created things. One foot he centered, and the other turned round to the vast profundity obscure, and said, Thus far extend, thus far thy bounds, this be thy just circumference, O world. Thus God the heaven created, thus the earth, matter unformed and void. Darkness profound covered the abyss, but on the watery calm his brooding wings the Spirit of God outspread, and vital virtue infused, and vital warmth throughout the fluid mass. But downward purged the black Tartarus cold infernal dregs adverse to life, then founded, then conglobed, like things to like, the rest to several place disparted, and between spun out the air, and earth self-balanced on her center hung. Let there be light, said God, and forthwith light ethereal, bursts of things, quintessence pure sprung from the deep. And from her native east to journey through the airy gloom began, sphered in a radiant cloud, for yet the sun was not. She in a cloudy tabernacle sojourned a while. God saw the light was good, and light from darkness by the hemisphere divided, light the day, and darkness night he named. Thus was the first day, even and morn, nor passed uncelebrated, nor unsung by the celestial choirs, when orient light exhaling first from darkness they beheld, birthday of heaven and earth. With joy and shout the hollow universal orb they filled, and touched their golden hearts, and hymning praise God and his works. Creator hymn they sung, both when first evening was, and when first morn. Again God said, Let there be firmament amid the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament expanse of liquid, pure, transparent, elemental air, diffused in circuit to the uttermost convex of this great land. Partition firm and sure, the waters underneath from those above dividing. For as earth, so he the world built on circumfluous waters calm, in wide crystalline oceans, and the loud misrule of chaos far removed, lest fierce extremes contiguous might distemper the whole frame. And heaven he named the firmament, so evening and morning chorus sang the second day. The earth was formed, but in the womb as yet of waters, embryon immature, involved, appeared not. Over all the face of earth main ocean flowed, not idle, but with warm, prolific humor softening all her globe, fermented the great mother to conceive, satiate with genial moisture, when God said, Be gathered now, ye waters under heaven, into one place, and let dry land appear. Immediately the mountains huge appear emergent, and their broad bare backs upheave into the clouds, their tops ascend the sky. So high is heaved the tumid hills, so low down sunk a hollow bottom broad and deep, capacious bed of waters. Thither they hasted with glad precipitance, uprolled as drops on dusk conglobing from the dry. Part rise in crystal wall, no ridge direct or haste. Such flight the great command impressed on the swift flood, as armies at the call of trumpet. For of armies thou hast heard, troop to their standard, so the watery throng, wave rolling after wave, where way they found, if steep, with torrent rapture, if through plain, soft ebbing. Nor withstood them rock or hill, but they, or underground, or circuit wide with serpent air wandering, found their way, and on the washy ooze deep channels wore. Easy, ere God had bid the ground be dry, all but within those banks, where rivers now stream, and perpetual draw their hymnal train. The dry land, earth, and the great receptacle of congregated waters he called seas, and saw that it was good, and said, Let the earth put forth the verdant grass, herb yielding seed, and fruit tree yielding fruit after her kind, whose seed is in herself upon the earth. He scarce had said, when the bare earth, till then desert and bare, unsightly, unadorned, brought forth the tender grass, whose verdure clad her universal face with pleasant green. Then herbs of every leaf, that sudden flowered, opening their various colors, and made gay her bosom smelling sweet. And these scarce blown, forth flourishing thick the clustering vine, forth crept the smelling gourd, up stood the corny reed, embattled in her field. And the humble shrub, and bush with frizzled hair implicit, last rose as in dance the stately trees, and spread their branches hung with copious fruit. Or gemmed their blossoms, with high woods the hills were crowned, with tufts the valley, and each fountain side, with borders long the rivers. That earth now seemed like to heaven, a seat where gods might dwell, or wander with delight, and love to haunt her sacred shades, though God had not yet reigned upon the earth, and man to till the ground none was. But from the earth a dewy mist went up and watered all the ground, and each plant of the field, which ere it was in the earth God made, and every herb before it grew on the green stem. God saw that it was good. So evening and morn recorded the third day. Again the Almighty spake, Let there be lights high in the expanse of heaven to divide the day from night. And let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days, and circling years, and let them be for lights as I ordained their office in the firmament of heaven to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, great for their use to man, the greater to have rule by day, the less by night altern. and made the stars, and set them in the firmament of heaven to illuminate the earth, and ruled the day in their vicissitude, and ruled the night, and light from darkness to divide. God saw, surveying his great work, that it was good. For of celestial bodies first the sun a mighty sphere he framed, unlightsome first, though of ethereal mould. Then formed the moon globose, and every magnitude of stars, and sowed with stars the heaven thick as a field. Of light by far the greater part he took, transplanted from her cloudy shrine, and placed in the sun's orb, made porous to receive and drink the liquid light, firm to retain her gathered beams, great palace now of light. Hither as to their fountain other stars repairing, in their golden urns draw light, and hence the morning planet gilds his horns. By tincture or reflection they augment their small peculiar, though from human sight so far remote, with diminution seen. First in his east the glorious lamp was seen, regent of day, and all the horizon round invested with bright rays, jocund to run his longitude through heaven's high road. The grey dawn, and the Pleiades before him dance, shedding sweet influence. Less bright the moon, but opposite in levelled west was set his mirror, with full face borrowing her light from him. For other light she needed none in that aspect, and still that distance keeps till night. Then in the east her turn she shines, revolved on heaven's great axle, and her reign with thousand lesser lights dividual holds, with thousand stars that then appeared spangling the hemisphere. Then first adorned with their bright luminaries that set and rose, glad evening and glad morn crowned the fourth day. And God said, let the waters generate reptile with spawn abundant, living soul, and let fowl fly above the earth with wings displayed on the open firmament of heaven. And God created the great whales, and each soul living, each that crept, which plenteously the waters generated by their kind, and every bird of wing after his kind, and saw that it was good, and blessed them, saying, be fruitful, multiply, and in the seas and lakes and running streams the waters fill, and let the fowl be multiplied on the earth. Forthwith the sounds and seas, each creek and bay with fry innumerable swarms, and shoals of fish that with their fins and shining scales glide under the green waves, in skulls that off bank the mid-sea. Part single or with mate graze the seaweed their pasture, and through groves of coral stray, or sporting with quick glance show to the sun their wave coats dropped with gold, or in their pearly shells at ease attend moist nutriment, or under rocks their food in jointed armor watch. On smooth the seal and bended dolphins play, part huge of bulk wallowing unwieldy, enormous in their gait tempest the ocean. There Leviathan, hugest of living creatures, on the deep stretch like a promontory sleeps or swims, and seems like a moving land, and at his gills draws in, and at his trunk spouts out a sea. Meanwhile the tepid caves, and fens and shores their brood as numerous hatch, from the egg that soon bursting with kindly rapture forth disclosed their callow young, but feathered soon, and fledged they summon their pens, and soaring the air sublime with clang despise the ground, under a cloud in prospect. There the eagle and the stork on cliffs and cedar tops their eyries build. Part loosely wing the region, part more wise in common, range in figure wedge their way, intelligent of seasons, and set forth their airy caravan high over seas flying, and over lands with mutual wing easing their flight. So steers the prudent crane her annual voyage, borne on winds. The air floats as they pass, fanned with unnumbered plumes. From branch to branch the smaller birds with song solace the woods, and spread their painted wings till even. nor then the solemn nightingale cease warbling, but all night tune her soft lays. Others on silver lakes and rivers bathe their downy breast, the swan with arched neck, between her white wings mantling proudly, rose her state with oary feet. Yet oft they quit the dank, and rising on stiff pennons, tower the mid-aerial sky. Others on ground walk firm, the crested cock, whose clarion sounds the silent hours, and the other whose gay train adorns him, colored with the florid hue of rainbows and starry eyes. The waters thus, with fish replenished, and the air with fowl, evening and morn solemnized the 5th day. The 6th, and of creation last arose with evening harps and matin, when God said, "Let the earth bring forth fowl living in her kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth, each in their kind." The earth obeyed, and straight opening her fertile womb teemed at birth innumerable living creatures, perfect forms, limbed and full grown. Out of the ground uprose, as from his lair, the wild beast, where he wanders in forest wild, in thicket, brake, or den. Among the trees in pairs they rose, they watched, the cattle in fields and meadows green, those rare and solitary, these in flocks pasturing at once, and in broad herds upsprung. The grassy clods now calved, now half appeared, the tawny lion, pawing to get free his hinder parts, then springs as broke from bonds, and rampant shakes his brindled mane. The ounce, the leopard, and the tiger, as the mole rising, the crumbled earth above them threw in hillocks. The swift stag from underground bore up his branching head, scarce from his mould bemoth, suggest born of earth beheaved his vastness. Fleeced the flocks and bleeding rose as plants, ambiguous between sea and land, the river horse and scaly crocodile. At once came forth whatever creeps the ground, insect or worm. Those wave their limber fans for wings, and smallest lineaments exact, in all the liveries decked of summer's pride, with spots of gold and purple, azure and green. These as a line their long dimension drew, streaking the ground with sinuous trace. Not all minions of nature, some of serpent kind, wondrous in length and corpulence involved their snaking folds and added wings. First crept the parsimonious emmet, provident of future, in small room, large heart enclosed, pattern of just equality, perhaps hereafter, joined in her popular tribes of commonality. Swarming next appeared the female bee, that feeds her husband drone deliciously, and builds her waxen cells with honey stored. The rest are numberless, and thou their nature knowest, and gavest them names, needless to be repeated. Nor unknown the serpent's subtlest beast of all the field, of huge extent sometimes, with brazen eyes and hairy mane terrific, though to thee not noxious, but obedient at thy call. Now heaven in all her glory shone, and rolled her motion, as the great first mover's hand first wheeled their course. Earth in her rich attire, consummate lovely smiled. Air, water, earth by fowl, fish, beast was flown, was swum, was walked frequent. And of the 6th day yet remained, there wanted yet the master work, the end of all yet done. A creature who not prone and brood as other creatures, but endued with sanctity of reason, might erect his stature, and upright with front serene govern the rest self-knowing, and from thence magnanimous to correspond with heaven, but grateful to acknowledge whence his good descends, thither with heart and voice and eyes directed in devotion, to adore and worship God supreme who made him chief of all his works. Therefore the omnipotent eternal Father, for where is not he present, thus to his Son audibly spake. Let us make now a man in our image, man in our similitude, and let them rule over the fish and fowl of sea and air, beasts of the field, over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps the ground. This said, he formed thee, Adam, thee, O man, dust of the ground, and in thy nostrils breathed the breath of life. In his own image he created thee, in the image of God express, and thou becamest a living soul. Male he created thee, but thy consort female for race. Then blessed mankind and said, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, subdue it, and throughout dominion hold over fish of the sea, and fowl of the air, and every living thing that moves on the earth. Wherever thus created, for no place is yet distinct by name, thence, as thou knowest, he brought thee into this delicious grove, this garden planted with the trees of God, delectable both to behold and taste, and freely all their pleasant fruit for food gave thee. All sorts are here that all the earth yields, variety without end. But of the tree which tasted works knowledge of good and evil, thou mayest not. In the day thou eatst, thou diest. Death is the penalty imposed. Beware, and govern well thy appetite, lest sin surprise thee, and her black attendant, death. Here finished he, and all that he had made viewed, and behold, all was entirely good. So even and morn accomplished the 6th day. Yet not till the Creator from his work desisting, though unwearied, up returned up to heaven of heavens, his high abode, thence to behold his new created world, the addition of his empire, and how it showed in prospect from his throne, how good, how fair, answering his great idea. Up he rode, followed with acclamation and the sounds symphonious of 10,000 harps that tuned angelic harmonies. The earth, the air resounded, thou rememberest, for thou heardst. The heavens and all the constellations rung, the planets in their station listening stood, while the bright pomp ascended jubilant. Open, ye everlasting gates, they sung, open, ye heavens, your living doors. Let in the great Creator from his work return magnificent, his 6 days' work, a world. Open, and henceforth oft, for God will deign to visit the dwellings of just men delighted, and with frequent intercourse thither will send his winged messengers on errands of supernal grace. So sung the glorious train ascending, he through heaven that opened wide her blazing portals, led to God's eternal house direct the way, a broad and ample road, whose dust is gold and pavement stars, as stars to thee appear, seen in the galaxy, that Milky Way, which nightly as a circling zone thou seest powdered with stars. And now on earth the 7th evening arose in Eden, for the sun was set, and twilight from the east came on, for running night, when at the holy mount of heaven's high-seated top, the imperial throne of Godhead, fixed forever firm and sure, the filial power arrived, and sat him down with his great Father, for he also went invisible, yet stayed, such privilege hath omnipresence. And the work ordained, author and end of all things, and from work now resting, blessed and hallowed the 7th day, as resting on that day from all his work, but not in silence wholly kept. The harp had work and rested not, the solemn pipe and dulcimer, all organs of sweet stop, all sounds on fret by string or golden wire, tempered soft tunings, intermixed with voice, choral or unison. Of incense clouds, fuming from golden censers hid the mount. Creation and the 6 days' acts they sung. Great are thy works, Jehovah, infinite thy power. What thought can measure thee, or tongue relate thee? greater now in thy return than from the giant angels. Thee that day thy thunders magnified, but to create is greater than created to destroy. Who can impair thee, mighty king, or bound thy empire? Easily the proud attempt of spirits apostate, and their counsels vain thou hast repelled, while impiously they thought thee to diminish, and from thee withdraw the number of thy worshippers. Who seeks to lessen thee, against his purposes serves to manifest the more thy might. His evil thou usest, and from thence creates more good. Witness this new made world, another heaven from heaven gate not far, founded in view on the clear hyaline, the glassy sea, of amplitude almost immense, with stars numerous, and every star perhaps a world of destined habitation. But thou knowest their seasons. Among these the seat of men, earth with her nether ocean circumfused, their pleasant dwelling place, thrice happy men, and sons of men, whom God hath thus advanced, created in his image, there to dwell and worship him, and in reward to rule over his works, on earth, in sea or air, and multiply a race of worshippers holy and just, thrice happy if they know their happiness, and persevere upright. So sung they, and the Empyrean rung with hallelujahs. Thus was Sabbath kept. And thy request think now fulfilled, that asked now first this world and face of things began, and what before thy memory was done from the beginning, that posterity informed by thee might know. If else thou seekst aught not surprising human measure, say. End of Book 7, Part 1.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 7, Part 2. To whom thus Adam gratefully replied, what thanks sufficient, or what recompense equal have I to render thee, divine historian, who thus largely hast allayed the thirst I had of knowledge, and vouchsafed this friendly condescension to relate things else by me unsearchable, now heard with wonder but delight, and, as is due, with glory attributed to the high Creator. Something yet of doubt remains, which only thy solution can resolve. When I behold this goodly frame, this world of heaven and earth consisting, and compute their magnitudes, this earth a spot, a grain, an atom with the firmament compared, and all her numbered stars that seem to roll spaces incomprehensible, for such their distance argues, and their swift return diurnal, merely to officiate light round this apacious earth, this punctual spot, one day and night, in all their vast survey, useless besides. Reasoning I oft admire, how nature wise and frugal could commit such disproportions with superfluous hand, so many nobler bodies to create, greater so manifold to this one use, for aught appears, and on their orbs impose such restless revolution day by day, repeated, while the sedentary earth, that better might with far less compass move, served by more noble than herself, attains her end without least motion, and receives as tribute such a sumless journey brought of incorporeal speed, her warmth and light, speed to describe whose swiftness number fails. So spake our sire, and by his countenance seemed entering on studious thoughts abstruse, which Eve, perceiving where she sat retired in sight, with lowliness majestic from her seat, and grace that one who saw to wish her stay, rose and went forth among her fruits and flowers, to visit how they prospered, bud and bloom, her nursery. They at her coming sprung, and touched by her fair tendance gladlier grew. Yet went she not, as not with such discourse delighted, or not capable her ear of what was high. Such pleasure she reserved, Adam relating, she sole auditress. Her husband the relator she preferred before the angel, and of him to ask chose rather. He she knew would intermix grateful digressions, and solve high dispute with conjugal caresses. From his lip not words alone pleased her. Oh, when meet now such pairs in love and mutual honour joined! With goddess-like demeanour forth she went, not unattended, for on her as queen a pomp of winning graces waited still, and from about her shot darts of desire, until all eyes to wish her still in sight. And Raphael now to Adam's doubt proposed, benevolent and facile, thus replied: To ask or search I blame thee not, for heaven is as the book of God before thee set, wherein to read his wondrous works, and learn his seasons, hours, or days, or months, or years. This to attain, whether heaven move or earth, imports not, if thou reckon right. The rest from man or angel the great architect did wisely to conceal, and not divulge, his secrets to be scanned by them who ought rather admire, or if they list to try, conjecture. He his fabric of the heavens hath left to their disputes, perhaps to move his laughter at their quaint opinions wide, hereafter, when they come to model heaven, and calculate the stars, how they will wield the mighty frame, how build, unbuild, contrive, to save appearances, how gird the sphere, with centric and eccentric scribbled o'er, cycle and epicycle, orb in orb. Already by thy reasoning this I guess, who art to lead thy offspring, and supposest that bodies bright and greater should not serve the less not bright, nor heaven such journeys run, earth sitting still, when she alone receives the benefit. Consider first, that great or bright infers not excellence. The earth, though in comparison of heaven so small, nor glistering, may of solid good contain more plenty than the sun that barren shines, whose virtue on itself works no effect, but in the fruitful earth. There first received his beams, unactive else, their vigour find. Yet not to earth are those bright luminaries officious, but to thee, earth's habitant. And for the heavens' wide circuit, let it speak the Maker's high magnificence, who built so spacious, and his line stretched out so far, that man may know he dwells not in his own. An edifice too large for him to fill, lodged in a small partition, and the rest ordained for uses to his Lord best known. The swiftness of those circles attribute, though numberless, to his omnipotence, that to corporeal substances could add speed almost spiritual. Me thou think'st not slow, who since the morning hour set out from heaven where God resides, and ere midday arrived in Eden, distance inexpressible by numbers that have name. But this I urge, admitting motion in the heavens to show invalid that which thee to doubt it moved. Not that I so affirm, though so it seem, to thee who hast thy dwelling here on earth. God, to remove his ways from human sense, placed heaven from earth so far that earthly sight, if it presume, might err in things too high, and no advantage gain. What if the sun be centre to the world, and other stars by his attractive virtue, and their own, incited, dance about him various rounds? Their wandering course now high, now low, then hid, progressive, retrograde, or standing still. In sixth thou seest, and what if seventh to these, the planet Earth, so steadfast though she seem, insensibly three different motions move? Which else to several spheres thou must ascribe, moved contrary with thwart obliquities, or save the sun his labour, and that swift nocturnal and diurnal Rom supposed, invisible else above all stars, the wheel of day and night, which needs not thy belief, if earth industrious of herself fetch day, travelling east, and with her part averse from the sun's beam meet night, her other part still luminous by his ray, what if that light, sent from her through the wide transpicuous air to the terrestrial moon, be as a star, enlightening her by day, as she by night this earth? Reciprocal, if land be there, fields and inhabitants, her spots thou seest, as clouds, and clouds may rain, and rain produce fruits in her softened soil for some to eat, allotted there. And other suns perhaps, with their attendant moons, thou wilt descry, communicating male and female light, which two great sexes animate the world, stored in each orb perhaps with some that live. For such vast room in nature unpossessed by living soul, desert and desolate, only to shine, yet scarce to contribute, each orb a glimpse of light, conveyed so far, down to this habitable, which returns light back to them, is obvious to dispute. But whether thus these things, or whether not, whether the sun predominant in heaven rise on earth, or earth rise on the sun, he from the east his flaming road begin, or she from west her silent course advance, with inoffensive pace that spinning sleeps on her soft axle while she paces e'en, and bears thee soft with the smooth air along. Solicit not thy thoughts with matters hid, leave them to God above, him serve and fear. Of other creatures, as him pleases best, wherever placed, let him dispose. Joy thou in what he gives to thee, this paradise, and thy fair Eve. Heaven is for thee too high to know what passes there. Be lowly, wise. Think only what concerns thee and thy being. Dream not of other worlds, what creatures there live, in what state, condition, or degree. Contented that thus far hath been revealed, not of earth only, but of highest heaven. To whom thus Adam, cleared of doubt, replied, Now fully hast thou satisfied me, pure intelligence of heaven, angel serene, and freed from intricacies, taught to live the easiest way, nor with perplexing thoughts to interrupt the sweet of life, from which God hath bid dwell far off all anxious cares, and not molest us, unless we ourselves seek them with wandering thoughts and notions vain. But at the mind or fancy is to rove, unchecked, and of her roving is no end, till warned or by experience taught she learn, that not to know at large of things remote, from use obscure and subtle, but to know that which before us lies in daily life, is the prime wisdom. What is more is fume, or emptiness, or fond impertinence, and renders us in things that most concern, unpractised, unprepared, and still to seek. Therefore from this high pitch let us descend a lower flight, and speak of things at hand, useful, whence haply mention may arise of something not unseasonable to ask by sufferance, and thy wonted favour deigned. Thee I have heard relating what was done ere my remembrance. Now hear me relate my story, which perhaps thou hast not heard. And day is yet not spent, till then thou seest how subtly to detain thee I devise, inviting thee to hear while I relate, fond were it not in hope of thy reply. For while I sit with thee I seem in heaven, and sweeter thy discourse is to my ear than fruits of palm tree, pleasantest to thirst and hunger both, from labour at the hour of sweet repast. They satiate and soon fill, though pleasant, but thy words with grace divine imbued bring to their sweetness no satiety. To whom thus Raphael answered, heavenly meek, Nor are thy lips ungraceful, sire of men, nor tongue ineloquent, for God on thee abundantly his gifts hath also poured, inward and outward both, his image fair. Speaking or mute, all comeliness and grace attends thee, and each word, each motion forms. Nor less think we in heaven of thee on earth than of our fellow servant, and inquire gladly into the ways of God with man. For God we see hath honoured thee, and set on man his equal love. Say therefore on, for I that day was absent, as befell, bound on a voyage uncouth and obscure, far on excursion toward the gates of hell, squared in full legion, such command we had, to see that none thence issued forth a spy, or enemy, while God was in his work, lest he, incensed at such irruption bold, destruction with creation might have mixed. Not that they durst without his leave attempt, but us he sends upon his high behests, for state as sovereign king, and to inure our prompt obedience. Fast we found, fast shut the dismal gates, and barricadoed strong. But long ere our approaching heard within noise other than the sound of dance or song, torment and loud lament and furious rage. Glad we returned up to the coasts of light ere Sabbath evening, so we had in charge. But thy relation now, for I attend, pleased with thy words no less than thou with mine. So spake the godlike power, and thus our sire. For man to tell how human life began is hard, for who himself beginning knew. Desire with thee still longer to converse induced me. As new waked from soundest sleep, soft on the flowery herb I found me laid, in balmy sweat, which with his beams the sun soon dried, and on the reeking moisture fed. Straight toward heaven my wondering eyes I turned, and gazed awhile the ample sky, till raised by quick instinctive motion up I sprung, as thitherward endeavouring, and upright stood on my feet. About me round I saw hill, dale, and shady woods, and sunny plains, and liquid laps of murmuring streams, by these creatures that lived and moved and walked or flew. Birds on the branches warbling, all things smiled with fragrance, and with joy my heart o'erflowed. Myself I then perused, and limb by limb surveyed, and sometimes went, and sometimes ran, with supple joints as lively vigour led. But who I was, or where, or from what cause, knew not. To speak I tried, and forthwith spake. My tongue obeyed, and readily could name whate'er I saw. Thou sun, said I, fair light, and thou enlightened earth, so fresh and gay, ye hills and dales, ye rivers, woods and plains, and ye that live and move, fair creatures, tell if ye saw, how came I thus, how here? Not of myself, by some great Maker then, in goodness and in power preeminent. Tell me, how may I know him, how adore, from whom I have that thus I move and live, and feel that I am happier than I know. While thus I called and strayed I knew not whither, from where I first drew air, and first beheld this happy light, when answer none returned, on a green shady bank, profuse of flowers, pensive I sat me down. There gentle sleep first found me, and with soft oppression seized my drowsed sense, untroubled though I thought I then was passing to my former state, insensible and forthwith to dissolve. When suddenly stood at my head a dream, whose inward apparition gently moved my fancy to believe I yet had being, and lived. One came, methought, of shape divine, and said, Thy mansion wants thee, Adam, rise, first man, of men innumerable ordained, first father, called by thee I come thy guide, to the garden of bliss, thy seat prepared. So saying, by the hand he took me, raised, and over fields and waters, as in air, smooth sliding without step, last led me up a woody mountain, whose high top was plain, a circuit wide, enclosed with goodliest trees, planted with walks and bowers, that what I saw of earth before scarce pleasant seemed, each tree loaden with fairest fruit, that hung to the eye tempting, stirred in me sudden appetite to pluck and eat, whereat I waked, and found before mine eyes all real as the dream had lively shadowed. Here had new begun my wandering Had not he who was my guide up hither from among the trees appeared, presence divine, rejoicing but with awe, in adoration at his feet I fell, submiss. He reared me, and whom thou sought'st, I am, said mildly. Author of all this thou seest, above or round about thee, or beneath. This paradise I give thee, count it thine, to till and keep, and of the fruit to eat, of every tree that in the garden grows, eat freely with glad heart, fear here no dearth. But of the tree, whose operation brings knowledge of good and ill, which I have set, pledge of thy obedience and thy faith, amid the garden by the tree of life, remember what I warn thee, shun to taste, and shun the bitter consequence, for know, the day thou eat'st thereof, my sole command transgressed, inevitably thou shalt die, from that day mortal, and this happy state shalt lose, expelled from hence into a world of woe and sorrow. Sternly he pronounced the rigid interdiction, which resounds yet dreadful in mine ear, though in my choice not to incur. But soon his clear aspect returned, and gracious purpose thus renewed. Not only these fair bounds, but all the earth to thee and to thy race I give, as lords possess it, and all things that therein live, or live in sea or air, beast, fish, and fowl. In sign whereof each bird and beast behold after their kinds, I bring them to receive from thee their names, and pay thee fealty with low subjection. Understand the same of fish within their watery residence, not hither summoned, since they cannot change their element to draw the thinner air. As thus he spake, each bird and beast behold approaching two and two, these cowering low with blandishment, each bird stooped on his wing. I named them as they passed, and understood their nature, with such knowledge God endued my sudden apprehension. But in these I found not what methought I wanted still, and to the heavenly vision thus presumed. Oh, by what name, for thou above all these, above mankind, or aught than mankind higher, surpassest far my naming, how may I adore thee, author of this universe, and all this good to man, for whose well-being so amply, and with hands so liberal, thou hast provided all things, but with me I see not who partakes. In solitude what happiness who can enjoy alone, or all enjoying, what contentment find? Thus I presumptuous, and the vision bright, as with a smile more brightened, thus replied, What call'st thou solitude? Is not the earth with various living creatures, and the air, replenished, and all these at thy command to come and play before thee? Know'st thou not their language and their ways? They also know and reason not contemptibly. With these find pastime and bear rule, thy realm is large. So spake the universal Lord, and seemed so ordering, I with leave of speech implored, and humble deprecation thus replied, Let not my words offend thee, heavenly power, my maker, be propitious while I speak. Hast thou not made me here thy substitute, and these inferior far beneath me set? Among unequals what society, consort, what harmony or true delight? Which must be mutual, in proportion due, given and received, but in disparity, the one intense, the other still remiss, cannot well suit with either, but soon prove tedious alike. Of fellowship I speak, such as I seek, fit to participate all rational delight, wherein the brute cannot be human consort. They rejoice, each with their kind, lion with lioness, so fitly them in pairs thou hast combined. Much less can bird with beast, or fish with fowl, so well converse, nor with the ox the ape. Worse then can man with beast, and least of all. Whereto th' Almighty answered, not displeased, A nice and subtle happiness I see thou to thyself proposest, in the choice of thy associates, Adam, and wilt taste no pleasure, though in pleasure solitary. What thinkst thou then of me and this my state? Seem I to thee sufficiently possessed of happiness or not, who am alone from all eternity, for none I know, second to me or like, equal much less? How have I then with whom to hold converse, save with the creatures which I made, and those to me inferior, infinite descents beneath what other creatures are to thee? He ceased. I lowly answered, to attain the height and depth of thy eternal ways, all human thoughts come short, supreme of things. Thou in thyself art perfect, and in thee is no deficience found. Not so is man, but in degree the cause of his desire, by conversation with his like to help, or solace his defects. No need that thou shouldst propagate, already infinite, and through all numbers absolute though one. But man by number is to manifest his single imperfection, and beget like of his like, his image multiply, in unity defective, which requires collateral love and dearest amity. Thou in thy secrecy, although alone, best with thyself accompanied, seek'st not social communication, yet so pleased canst raise thy creature to what height thou wilt, of union or communion deified. I by conversing cannot these erect from prone, nor in their ways complacence find. Thus I emboldened spake, and freedom used, permissive, and acceptance found, which gained this answer from the gracious voice divine. Thus far to try thee, Adam, I was pleased, and find thee knowing not of beasts alone, which thou hast rightly named, but of thyself, expressing well the spirit within thee free. My image, not imparted to the brute, whose fellowship therefore unmeet for thee. Good reason was thou freely shouldst dislike, and be so minded still. I, ere thou spakest, knew it not good for man to be alone, and no such company as then thou saw'st intended thee, but trial only brought to see how thou couldst judge of fit and meet. What next I bring shall please thee, be assured, thy likeness, thy fit help, thy other self, thy wish, exactly to thy heart's desire. He ended, or I heard no more, for now my earthly by his heavenly overpowered, which it had long stood under, strained to the height in that celestial colloquy sublime, as with an object that excels the sense, dazzled and spent, sunk down and sought repair of sleep, which instantly fell on me, called by nature as in aid, and closed mine eyes. Mine eyes he closed, but open left the cell of fancy my internal sight, by which abstract as in a trance methought I saw, though sleeping, where I lay, and saw the shape still glorious before whom awake I stood, who, stooping, opened my left side, and took from thence a rib, with cordial spirits warm, and life-blood streaming fresh. Wide was the wound, but suddenly with flesh filled up and healed. The rib he formed and fashioned with his hands. Under his forming hands a creature grew, manlike, but different sex, so lovely fair, that what seemed fair in all the world seemed now mean, or in her summed up, in her contained, and in her looks, which from that time infused sweetness into my heart, unfelt before, and into all things from her air inspired the spirit of love and amorous delight. She disappeared and left me dark. I waked to find her, or forever to deplore her loss, and other pleasures all abjure. When out of hope, behold her not far off, such as I saw her in my dream, adorned with what all earth or heaven could bestow to make her amiable. On she came, led by her heavenly Maker, though unseen, and guided by his voice, nor uninformed of nuptial sanctity and marriage rites. Grace was in all her steps, heaven in her eye, in every gesture dignity and love. I, overjoyed, could not forbear aloud, "This turn hath made amends. Thou hast fulfilled thy words, Creator bounteous and benign, giver of all things fair, but fairest this of all thy gifts, nor enviest. I now see, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, myself before me. Woman is her name, of man extracted. For this cause he shall forego father and mother, and to his wife adhere, and they shall be one flesh, one heart, one soul. She heard me thus, and though divinely brought, yet innocence and virgin modesty, her virtue and the conscience of her worth, that would be wooed and not unsought be won, not obvious, not obtrusive, but retired, the more desirable, or to say all, nature herself, though pure of sinful thought, wrought in her so, that seeing me she turned. I followed her, she what was honour knew, and with obsequious majesty approved my pleaded reason. To the nuptial bower I led her, blushing like the morn. All heaven and happy constellations on that hour shed their selectest influence. The earth gave sign of gratulation, and each hill. Joyous the birds, fresh gales and gentle airs whispered it to the woods, and from their wings flung rose, flung odours from the spicy shrub, disporting till the amorous bird of night sung spousal, and bid haste the evening star on his hilltop to light the bridal lamp. Thus I have told thee all my state, and brought my story to the sum of earthly bliss which I enjoy, and must confess to find in all things else delight indeed, but such as used or not works in the mind no change, nor vehement desire, these delicacies I mean, of taste, sight, smell, herbs, fruits and flowers, walks and the melody of birds, but here far otherwise. Transported I behold, transported touch. Here passion first I felt, commotion strange, in all enjoyments else superior and unmoved. Here only weak against the charm of beauty's powerful glance. Or nature failed in me and left some part, not proof enough such object to sustain, or from my side subducting took perhaps more than enough, at least on her bestowed too much of ornament, in outward show elaborate, of inward less exact. For well I understand in the prime end of nature her th' inferior, in the mind and inward faculties which most excel, in outward also her resembling less his image who made both, and less expressing the character of that dominion given o'er other creatures. Yet when I approach her loveliness, so absolute she seems, and in herself complete, so well to know her own, that what she wills to do or say seems wisest, virtuousest, discreetest, best. All higher knowledge in her presence falls degraded. Wisdom in discourse with her loses discountenanced, and like folly shows. Authority and reason on her wait as one intended first, not after made, occasionally. And to consummate all, greatness of mind and nobleness their seat, build in her loveliest, and create an awe about her, as a guard angelic placed. To whom the angel with contracted brow: accuse not nature, she hath done her part, do thou but thine, and be not diffident of wisdom. She deserts thee not, if thou dismiss not her, when most thou needst her nigh. By attributing overmuch to things less excellent, as thou thyself perceiv'st. For what admirest thou, what transports thee so? An outside? Fair, no doubt, and worthy well thy cherishing, thy honouring, and thy love, not thy subjection. Weigh with her thyself, then value. Ofttimes nothing profits more than self-esteem, grounded on just and right, well managed. Of that skill the more thou know'st, the more she will acknowledge thee her head, and to realities yield all her shows. Made so adorned for thy delight the more, so awful that with honour thou mayst love thy mate, who sees when thou art seen least wise. But if the sense of touch whereby mankind is propagated seem such dear delight beyond all other, think the same vouchsafed to cattle and each beast, which would not be to them made common and divulged. if aught therein enjoyed were worthy to subdue the soul of man, or passion in him move. What higher in her society thou find'st, attractive, human, rational, love still, in loving thou dost well, in passion not, wherein true love consists not. Love refines the thoughts and heart enlarges, hath his seat in reason, and is judicious, is the scale by which to heavenly love thou mayst ascend, not sunk in carnal pleasure, for which cause among the beasts no mate for thee was found. To whom thus half abashed Adam replied, neither her outside form so fair, nor aught in procreation common to all kinds, though higher of the genial bed by far, and with mysterious reverence I deem, so much delights me as those graceful acts, those thousand decencies that daily flow from all her words and actions, mixed with love and sweet compliance, which declare unfeigned union of mind, or in us both one soul. Harmony to behold in wedded pair, more grateful than harmonious sound to the ear. Yet these subject not. I to thee disclose what inward thence I feel, not therefore foiled, who meet with various objects from the sense variously representing, yet still free approve the best, and follow what I approve. To love thou blamest me not, for love thou say'st leads up to heaven, is both the way and guide. Bear with me then, if lawful, what I ask. Love not the heavenly spirits, and how their love express they? By looks only, or do they mix irradiance, virtual or immediate touch? To whom the angel with a smile that glowed, celestial rosy red, love's proper hue, answered, let it suffice thee that thou know'st us happy, and without love no happiness. Whatever pure thou in the body enjoy'st, and pure thou wert created, we enjoy in eminence, and obstacle find none of membrane, joint or limb, exclusive bars. Easier than air with air, if spirits embrace, total they mix. Union of pure with pure desiring, nor restrained conveyance need, as flesh to mix with flesh, or soul with soul. But I can now no more. The parting sun beyond the earth's green cape and verdant isles Hesperian sets, my signal to depart. Be strong, live happy, and love, but first of all him, whom to love is to obey, and keep his great command. Take heed lest passion sway thy judgment to do aught which else free will would not admit. Thine and of all thy sons the weal or woe in thee is placed. Beware! I in thy persevering shall rejoice, and all the blessed. Stand fast, to stand or fall, free in thine own arbitrament it lies. Perfect within, no outward aid require, and all temptation to transgress repel. So saying he arose, whom Adam thus followed with benediction. Since to part, go, heavenly guest, ethereal messenger, sent from whose sovereign goodness I adore. Gentle to me and affable hath been thy condescension, and shall be honoured ever with grateful memory. Thou to mankind be good and friendly still, and oft returned. So parted they, the angel up to heaven from the thick shade, and Adam to his bower. End of Book 7.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Greg Bryant. Paradise Lost by John Milton, Book 8, Part 1. No more of talk where God or angel guest with man as with his friend, familiar used to sit indulgent, and with him partake rural repast, permitting him the while venial discourse unblamed. I now must change those notes to tragic. Foul distrust and breach disloyal on the part of man, revolt and disobedience. on the part of heaven now alienated, distance and distaste, anger and just rebuke, and judgment given, that brought into this world a world of woe, sin and her shadow death, and misery, death's harbinger. Sad task, yet argument not less but more heroic than the wrath of stern Achilles on his foe pursued thrice fugitive about Troy wall, or rage of Turnus for Lavinia disespoused, or Neptune's ire, or Juno's, that so long perplexed the Greek and Cytherea's son. If answerable style I can obtain of my celestial patroness, who deigns her nightly visitation unimplored, and dictates to me slumbering, or inspires easy my unpremeditated verse. Since first this subject for heroic song pleased me, long choosing, and beginning late, not sedulous by nature to indite wars, hitherto the only argument heroic deemed, chief mastery to dissect with long and tedious havoc fabled knights in battles feigned, the better fortitude of patience and heroic martyrdom unsung, or to describe races and games or tilting furniture, emblazoned shields, impresses quaint, caparisons and steeds, bases and tinsel trappings, gorgeous knights at joust and tournament, then martial feast served up in hall with sewers and seneschals, the skill of artifice or office mean, not that which justly gives heroic name to person or to poem. Me of these nor skilled nor studious, higher argument remains, sufficient of itself to raise that name, unless an age too late, or cold climate, or years damp my intended wing depressed. And much they may, if all be mine, not hers who brings it nightly to my ear. The sun was sunk, and after him the star of Hesperus, whose office is to bring twilight upon the earth, short arbiter twixt day and night. And now from end to end night's hemisphere had veiled the horizon round, when Satan, who late fled before the threats of Gabriel out of Eden, now improved in meditated fraud and malice, bent on man's destruction, maugre what might hap of heavier on himself, fearless returned. By night he fled, and at midnight returned, from compassing the earth, cautious of day, since Uriel, regent of the sun, descried his entrance, and forewarned the cherubim that kept their watch. Thence, full of anguish driven, the space of 7 continued nights he rode with darkness. Thrice the equinoctial line he circled. 4 times crossed the car of night from pole to pole, traversing each colure. On the 8th returned, and on the coast, averse from entrance or cherubic watch, by stealth found unsuspected way. There was a place, now not, though sin not time first wrought the change, where Tigris at the foot of paradise into a gulf shot underground, till part rose up a fountain by the tree of life. In with the river sunk, and with it rose Satan involved in rising mist, then sought where to lie hid. Sea he had searched, and land from Eden over Pontus, and the pool Maeotis, up beyond the river Ob, downward as far Antarctic, and in length west from Orontes to the ocean barred at Darien. Thence to the land where flows Ganges and Indus, thus the orb he roamed with narrow search, and with inspection deep considered every creature, which of all most opportune might serve his wiles, and found the serpent, subtlest beast of all the field. Him, after long debate, irresolute of thoughts revolved, his final sentence chose fit vessel, fittest imp of fraud, in whom to enter, and his dark suggestions hide from sharpest sight. For in the wily snake, whatever slights, none would suspicious mark, as from his wit and native subtlety proceeding, which in other beasts observed, doubt might beget of diabolic power active within beyond the sense of brute. Thus he resolved, but first from inward grief his bursting passion into plaints thus poured. O earth, how like to heaven, if not preferred more justly, seat worthier of gods, as built with second thoughts, reforming what was old. For what god after better worse would build? Terrestrial heaven, danced round by other heavens that shine, yet bear their bright officious lamps light above light for thee alone, as seems, in thee concentring all their precious beams of sacred influence. As God in heaven is center, yet extends to all, so thou, centering, receivest from all these orbs. In thee, not in themselves, all their known virtue appears productive in herb, plant, and nobler birth of creatures animate with gradual life of growth, sense, reason, all summed up in man. With what delight could I have walked thee round, if I could joy in aught? Sweet interchange of hill and valley, rivers, woods, and plains, now land, now sea, and shores with forest crowned, rocks, dens, and caves. But I in none of these find place or refuge, and the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I feel torment within me, as from the hateful siege of contraries. All good to me becomes bane, and in heaven much worse would be my state. But neither here seek I, no, nor in heaven to dwell, unless by mastering heaven's supreme, nor hope to be myself less miserable by what I seek, but others to make such as I, though thereby worse to me redound. For only in destroying I find ease to my relentless thoughts, and him destroyed, or one to what may work his utter loss, for whom all this was made, all this will soon follow, as to him linked in weal or woe. In woe, then, that destruction wide may range. To me shall be the glory sole among the infernal powers, in one day to have marred what he Almighty styled 6 nights and days continued making, and who knows how long before had been contriving, though perhaps not longer than since I in one night freed from servitude inglorious well-nigh half the angelic name, and thinner left the throng of his adorers, he to be avenged, and to repair his numbers thus impaired, whether such virtue spent of old now failed more angels to create, if they at least are his created, or to spite us more, determined to advance into our room a creature formed of earth, and him endow, exalted from so base original, with heavenly spoils, our spoils. What he decreed he effected. Man he made, and for him built magnificent this world, and earth his seat. Him Lord pronounced, and oh indignity, subjected to his service angel wings, and flaming ministers to watch and tend their earthly charge. Of these the vigilance I dread, and to elude, thus wrapped in mist of midnight vapor glide obscure, and pry in every bush and brake, where hap may find the serpent sleeping, in whose mazy folds to hide me and the dark intent I bring. O foul descent, that I, who erst contended with gods to sit the highest, am now constrained into a beast, and mixed with bestial slime, this essence to incarnate and imbrute, that to the height of deity aspire. But what will not ambition and revenge descend to? Who aspires must down as low as high he soared, obnoxious first or last to basest things. Revenge, at first though sweet, bitter ere long, back on itself recoils. Let it, I reck not, so it light well aimed, since higher I fall short, on him who next provokes my envy, this new favorite of heaven, this man of clay, son of despite, who must the more to spite his maker raised from dust. Spite then with spite is best repaid. So saying, through each thicket dank or dry, like a black mist low creeping, he held on his midnight search, where soonest he might find the serpent. Him fast sleeping soon he found in labyrinth of many a round self-rolled, his head bemidst, well stored with subtle wiles. Not yet in horrid shade or dismal den, nor nocent yet, but on the grassy herb, fearless unfeared he slept. In at his mouth the devil entered, and his brutal sense, in heart or head, possessing soon inspired with act intelligential, but his sleep disturbed not, waiting close the approach of morn. Now when as sacred light began to dawn in Eden on the humid flowers that breathed their morning incense, when all things that breathe from the earth's great altar send up silent praise to the Creator, and his nostrils fill with grateful smell, forth came the human pair and joined their vocal worship to the choir of creatures wanting voice. That done, partake the season, prime for sweetest scents and airs. Then commune how that day they best may ply their growing work. for much their work outgrew the hand's dispatch of two gardening so wide. And Eve first to her husband thus began: Adam, well may we labor still to dress this garden, still to tend plant, herb, and flower, our pleasant task enjoined. But till more hands aid us, the work under our labor grows, luxurious by restraint. What we by day lop overgrown, or prune, or prop, or bind, one night or two with wanton growth derides, tending to wild. Thou therefore now advise, or hear what to my mind first thoughts present. Let us divide our labors, thou where choice leads thee, or where most needs, whether to wind the woodbine round this arbor, or direct the clasping ivy where to climb, while I, in yonder spring of roses intermixed with myrtle, find what to redress till noon. For while so near each other thus all day our task we choose, what wonder if so near looks intervene and smiles, or object new casual discourse draw on, which intermits our day's work brought to little, though begun early, and the hour of supper comes unearned. To whom mild answer Adam thus returned: Soul Eve, associate soul, to me beyond compare, above all living creatures dear. Well hast thou motioned, well thy thoughts employed, how we might best fulfill the work which here God hath assigned us. Nor of me shalt pass unpraised, for nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good, and good works in her husband to promote. Yet not so strictly hath our Lord imposed labor as to debar us when we need refreshment, whether food or talk between, food of the mind, or this sweet intercourse of looks and smiles, for smiles from reason flow, to brute denied, and are of love the food, love not the lowest end of human life. For not to irksome toil, but to delight he made us, and delight to reason joined. These paths and bowers doubt not but our joint hands will keep from wilderness with ease, as wide as we need walk, till younger hands ere long assist us. But if much converse perhaps thee satiate, to short absence I could yield. For solitude sometimes is best society, and short retirement urges sweet return. But other doubt possesses me, lest harm befall thee severed from me. For thou knowest what hath been warned us, what malicious foe, envying our happiness, and of his own despairing, seeks to work us woe and shame by sly assault. And somewhere nigh at hand watches, no doubt, with greedy hope to find his wish and best advantage, us asunder, hopeless to circumvent us joined, where each to other speedy aid might lend at need. Whether his first design be to withdraw our fealty from God, or to disturb conjugal love, than which perhaps no bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more. Or this, or worse, leave not the faithful side that gave thee being, still shades thee and protects. The wife, where danger or dishonor lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her, or with her the worst endures. To whom the virgin majesty of Eve, as one who loves, and some unkindness meets, with sweet austere composure, thus replied: Offspring of heaven and earth, and all earth's Lord, that such an enemy we have, who seeks our ruin, both by thee informed I learn, and from the parting angel overheard, as in a shady nook I stood behind, just then returned at shut of evening flowers. But that thou shouldst my firmness therefore doubt to God or thee, because we have a foe may tempt it, I expected not to hear. His violence thou fearst not, being such as we, not capable of death or pain, can either not receive, or can repel. His fraud is then thy fear, which plain infers thy equal fear that my firm faith and love can by his fraud be shaken or seduced. Thoughts which how found they harbor in thy breast, Adam, misthought of her to thee so dear? To whom with healing words Adam replied: Daughter of God and man, immortal Eve, for such thou art, from sin and blame entire. Not diffident of thee do I dissuade thy absence from my sight, but to avoid the attempt itself, intended by our foe. For he who tempts, though in vain, at least asperses the tempted with dishonor foul, supposed not incorruptible of faith, not proof against temptation. Thou thyself with scorn and anger wouldst resent the offered wrong, though ineffectual found. Misdeem not then, if such affront I labor to avert from thee alone, which on us both at once the enemy, though bold, will hardly dare, or daring, first on me the assault shall light. Nor thou his malice and false guile contemn. Subtle he needs must be, who could seduce angels, nor think superfluous others' aid. I from the influence of thy looks receive access in every virtue, in thy sight more wise, more watchful, stronger, if need were, of outward strength, while shame, thou looking on, shame to be overcome or overreached, would utmost vigor raise, and raised unite. Why shouldst not thou like sense within thee feel when I am present, and thy trial choose with me, best witness of thy virtue tried? So spake domestic Adam in his care and matrimonial love. But Eve, who thought less, attributed to her faith sincere, thus her reply with accent sweet renewed. If this be our condition, thus to dwell in narrow circuit straitened by a foe, subtle or violent, we not endued, singled with like defense, wherever met, how are we happy, still in fear of harm? But harm precedes not sin. Only our foe, attempting, affronts us with his foul esteem of our integrity. His foul esteem sticks no dishonor on our friend, but turns foul on himself. Then wherefore shunned or feared by us, who rather double honor gain from his surmise proved false, find peace within, favor from heaven, our witness from the event. And what is faith, love, virtue, unassayed alone, without exterior help sustained? Let us not then suspect our happy state left so imperfect by the Maker wise, as not secure to single or combined. Frail is our happiness if this be so, and Eden were no Eden thus exposed. To whom thus Adam fervently replied, O woman, best are all things as the will of God ordained them. His creating hand, nothing imperfect or deficient left of all that he created, much less man, or aught that might his happy state secure from outward force. Within himself the danger lies, yet lies within his power. Against his will he can receive no harm. But God left free the will, for what obeys reason is free, and reason he made right, but bid her well beware, and still erect, lest by some fair appearing good surprised she dictate false, and misinform the will to do what God expressly hath forbid. Not then mistrust, but tender love enjoins that I should mind thee oft, and mind thou me. Firm we subsist, yet possible to swerve, since reason not impossibly may meet some specious object by the foe suborned, and fall into deception unaware, not keeping strictest watch as she was warned. Seek not temptation then, which to avoid were better, and most likely, if from me thou sever not, trial will come unsought. Wouldst thou approve thy constancy, approve first thy obedience. The other who can know, not seeing the attempted, who attest? But if thou think trial unsought may find us both securer, then thus warned thou seemst. Go, for thy stay not free absents thee more. Go in thy native innocence, rely on what thou hast of virtue, summon all, for God towards thee hath done his part. Do thine. So spake the patriarch of mankind, but Eve persisted, yet submiss, though last, replied, With thy permission then, and thus forewarned, chiefly by what thy own last reasoning words touched only, that our trial, when least sought, may find us both perhaps far less prepared, the willinger I go, nor much expect a foe so proud will first the weaker seek, so bent the more shall shame him his repulse. Thus saying, from her husband's hand her hand soft she withdrew, and like a wood nymph light, Oread or Dryad, or of Delia's train, betook her to the groves. But Delia's self in gape surpassed, and goddess-like deport, though not as she with bow and quiver armed, but with such gardening tools as art, yet rude, guiltless of fire, had formed, or angels brought. To Palles or Pomona, thus adorned likely as she seemed, Pomona when she fled Vertumnus, or to Ceres in her prime, yet virgin of Proserpina from Jove. Her long with ardent look his eye pursued delighted, but desiring more her stay. Oft he to her his charge of quick return repeated, she to him as oft engaged to be returned by noon amid the bower, and all things in best order to invite noontide repast or afternoon's repose. O much deceived, much failing, hapless eve of thy presumed return, event perverse! Thou never from that hour in paradise foundst either sweet repast or sound repose. Such ambush, hid among sweet flowers and shades, waited with hellish rancor imminent to intercept thy way, or send thee back despoiled of innocence, of faith, of bliss. For now, and since the break of dawn, the fiend mere serpent in appearance, forth was come and on his quest, where likeliest he might find the only two of mankind, but in them the whole included race, his purposed prey. In bower and field he sought, where any tuft of grove or garden plot more pleasant lay, their tendance or plantation for delight, by fountain or by shady rivulet he sought them both, but wished his hap might find Eve separate. He wished, but not with hope of what so seldom chanced, when to his wish, beyond his hope, Eve separate he spies, veiled in a cloud of fragrance, where she stood half spied, so thick the roses bushing round about her glowed, oft stooping to support each flower of slender stalk, whose head, though gay carnation, purple, azure, or specked with gold, hung drooping unsustained. Them she upstays gently with myrtle band, mindless the while herself, though fairest unsupported flower, from her best prop so far, and storm so nigh. Nearer he drew, and many a walk traversed of stateliest covert, cedar, pine, or palm, then voluble and bold, now hid, now seen among thick-woven arborets and flowers embroidered on each bank, the hand of Eve, spot more delicious than those gardens famed or of revived Adonis, or renowned Alcinous, host of old Laertes' son, or that not mystic, where the sapient king held dalliance with his fair Egyptian spouse. Much he the place admired, the person more, as one who long in populous city pent, where houses thick and sewers annoy the air, forth issuing on a summer's morn to breathe among the pleasant villages and farms adjoined. From each thing met conceives delight, the smell of grain, or tedded grass, or kine, or dairy, each rural sight, each rural sound. If chance with nymph-like step fair virgin passed, what pleasing seemed, for her now pleases more, she most, and in her look sums all delight. Such pleasure took the serpent to behold this flowery plat, the sweet recess of Eve thus early, thus alone, her heavenly form angelic, but more soft and feminine, her graceful innocence, her every air of gesture or least action overawed his malice, and with rapine sweet bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought. That space the evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good, of enmity disarmed, of guile, of hate, of envy, of revenge. But the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects, and all his thoughts of mischief, gratulating thus excites. Thoughts, whither have ye led me? With what sweet compulsion thus transported to forget what hither brought us? Hate, not love, nor hope of paradise for hell, hope here to taste of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy, save what is in destroying. Other joy to me is lost. Then let me not let pass occasion which now smiles. Behold alone the woman, opportune to all attempts. Her husband, for I view far around, not nigh, whose higher intellectual more I shun, and strength of courage haughty, and of limb heroic built, though of terrestrial mold, foe not informidable, exempt from wound, I not. So much hath hell debased and pain enfeebled me to what I was in heaven. She fair, divinely fair, fit love for gods, not terrible, though terror be in love and beauty, not approached by stronger hate, hate stronger, under show of love well feigned, the way which to her ruin now I tend. So spake the enemy of mankind, enclosed in serpent, inmate bad, and toward Eve addressed his way, not with indented wave prone on the ground as since, but on his rear circular base of rising folds that towered fold above fold a surging maze, his head crested aloft, and carbuncle his eyes, with burnished neck of verdant gold, erect amidst his circling spires, that on the grass floated redundant. Pleasing was his shape, and lovely, never since of serpent kind lovelier, not those that in Illyria changed Hermione and Cadmus, or the god in Epidaurus, nor to which transformed Ammonian Jove or Capitoline was seen. He with Olympias, this with her who bore Scipio the height of Rome. With tract oblique at first, as one who sought access but feared to interrupt, sidelong he works his way. End of Book 8, Part 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Greg Bryant. Paradise Lost by John Milton, Book 8, Part 2. As when a ship by skillful steersman wrought nigh river's mouth or foreland, where the wind veers oft, as oft so steers and shifts her sail, so varied he, and of his tortuous train curled many a wanton wreath in sight of Eve, to lure her eye. She busied, heard the sound of rustling leaves, but minded not, as used to such disport before her through the field, from every beast, more duteous at her call than at Circean call the herd disguised. He bolder now, uncalled before her stood, but as in gaze admiring, oft he bowed his turret crest, and sleek enameled neck fawning, and licked the ground whereon she trod. His gentle dumb expression turned at length the eye of Eve to mark his play. He glad of her attention gained, with serpent tongue organic, or impulse of vocal air, his fraudulent temptation thus began. Wonder not, sovereign mistress, if perhaps thou canst, who art sole wonder, much less arm thy looks, the heaven of mildness, with disdain. Displeased that I approach thee thus, and gaze insatiate, I thus single, nor have feared thy awful brow, more awful thus retired. Fairest resemblance of thy Maker fair, thee all things living gaze on, all things thine by gift, and thy celestial beauty adore with ravishment beheld. There best beheld where universally admired. But here, in this enclosure wild, these beasts among, beholders rude, and shallow to discern half what in thee is fair, one man except, who sees thee, and what is one, who shouldst be seen a goddess among gods, adored and served by angels numberless, thy daily train. So glows the tempter, and his proem tuned. Into the heart of Eve his words made way, though at the voice much marveling, at length not unamazed she thus in answer spake. What may this mean? Language of man pronounced by tongue of brute, and human sense expressed? The first at least of these I thought denied to beasts, whom God on their creation day created mute to all articulate sound. The latter I demur, for in their looks much reason, and in their actions oft appears. Thee, serpent, subtlest beast of all the field, I knew, but not with human voice endued. Redouble then this miracle, and say, how camest thou speakable of mute, and how to me so friendly grown above the rest of brutal kind, that daily are in sight? Say, for such wonder claims attention due. To whom the guileful tempter thus replied, Empress of this fair world, resplendent Eve, easy to me it is to tell thee all what thou commandst, and right thou shouldst be obeyed. I was at first as other beasts that graze the trodden earth, of abject thoughts and low, as was my food, nor aught but food discerned, or sex, and apprehended nothing high. Till on a day, roving the field, I chanced a goodly tree far distant to behold, loaden with fruit of fairest colors mixed, ruddy and gold. I nearer drew to gaze, when from the boughs a savory odor blown, grateful to appetite, more pleased my sense than smell of sweetest fennel, or the teats of ewe or goat dropping with milk at even, unsucked of lamb or kid that tend their play. To satisfy the sharp desire I had of tasting those fair apples, I resolved not to defer. Hunger and thirst at once, powerful persuaders, quickened at the scent of that alluring fruit, urged me so keen. About the mossy trunk I wound me soon, for high from ground the branches would require thy utmost reach, or Adam's. Round the tree all other beasts that saw, with like desire longing and envying stood, but could not reach. Amid the tree now got, where plenty hung tempting so nigh, to pluck and eat my fill I spared not. For such pleasure till that hour at feed or fountain never had I found. Sated at length, ere long I might perceive strange alteration in me, to degree of reason in my inward powers, and speech wanted not long, though to this shape retained. Thenceforth to speculations high or deep I turned my thoughts, and with capacious mind considered all things visible in heaven, or earth, or middle, all things fair and good. But all that fair and good in thy divine semblance, and in thy beauty's heavenly ray united I beheld. No fair to thine equivalent or second, which compelled me thus, though importune perhaps, to come and gaze, and worship thee of right declared sovereign of creatures, universal dame. So talked the spirited sly snake, and Eve, yet more amazed, unwary, thus replied, Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit, whom thee first proved. But say, where grows the tree? From hence how far? For many are the trees of God that grow in paradise, and various yet unknown to us. In such abundance lies our choice, as leaves a greater store of fruit untouched, still hanging incorruptible, till men grow up to their provision, and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. To whom the wily adder, blithe and glad, Empress, the way is ready, and not long. Behold a row of myrtles on a flat, fast by a fountain, one small thicket past of blowing myrrh and balm. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither soon. Lead then, said Eve. He leading, swiftly rolled in tangles, and made intricate seem straight to mischief swift. Hope elevates, and joy brightens his crest, as when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapor, which the night condenses and the cold environs round, kindled through agitation to a flame, which oft, they say, some evil spirit attends, hovering and blazing with delusive light, misleads the amazed night wanderer from his way to bogs and mires, and oft through pond or pool, there swallowed up and lost from succor far. So glistered the dire snake, and into fraud led Eve, our credulous mother, to the tree of prohibition, root of all our woe, which when she saw, thus to her guide she spake, Serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rest with thee, wondrous indeed, if cause of such effects. But of this tree we may not taste nor touch. God so commanded, and left that command sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves, our reason is our law. To whom the tempter guilefully replied, Indeed? Hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat, yet lords declared of all in earth or air? To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, Of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden God hath said, Ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye touch it, lest ye die. She scarce had said, though brief, when now more bold the tempter, but with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new part puts on, and as to passion moved, fluctuates disturbed, yet comely and in act raised, as of some great matter to begin. As when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected, while each part, motion, each act won audience ere the tongue, sometimes in height began, as no delay of preface brooking through his zeal of right, So standing, moving, or to height upgrown, the tempter all impassioned thus began. O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener, look on me, me who have touched and tasted, yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil? Of good, how just? Of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye and be just. Not just, not God. Not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbid? Why but to awe? Why but to keep ye low and ignorant, his worshippers? He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil as they know. That ye should be as gods, since I as man, internal man, is but proportioned meet, I of brute human, ye of human gods. So ye shall die perhaps by putting off human to put on gods, death to be wished, though threatened, which no worse than this can bring. And what are gods that man may not become as they, participating godlike food? The gods are first, and that advantage use on our belief, that all from them proceeds. I question it. For this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind, them nothing. If they all things, who enclosed knowledge of good and evil in this tree, that whoso eats thereof forthwith attains wisdom without their leave? And wherein lies the offense, that man should thus attain to know? What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy? And can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These and many more causes import your need of this fair fruit. Goddess humane, reach then, and freely taste. He ended, and his words replete with guile into her heart too easy entrance won. Fixed on the fruit she gazed, which to behold might tempt alone, and in her ears the sound yet rung of his persuasive words, impregned with reason to her seeming, and with truth. Meanwhile the hour of noon drew on, and waked an eager appetite, raised by the smell so savory of that fruit, which with desire inclinable now grown to touch or taste, solicited her longing eye. Yet first pausing a while, thus to herself she mused, Great are thy virtues, doubtless, best of fruits, though kept from man, and worthy to be admired, whose taste, too long forborne, at first essay gave elocution to the mute, and taught the tongue not made for speech to speak thy praise. Thy praise he also, who forbids thy use, conceals not from us, naming thee the tree of knowledge, knowledge both of good and evil. Forbids us then to taste, but his forbidding commends thee more, while it infers the good by thee communicated, and our want. For good unknown sure is not had, or had and yet unknown is as not had at all. In plain then, what forbids he but to know? Forbids us good, forbids us to be wise. Such prohibitions bind not. But if death bind us with afterbands, what profits then our inward freedom? In the day we eat of this fair fruit, our doom is we shall die. How dies the serpent? He hath eaten and lives, and knows, and speaks, and reasons, and discerns, irrational till then. For us alone was death invented, or to us denied this intellectual food for beasts reserved? For beasts it seems, yet that one beast which first hath tasted envies not, but brings with joy the good befallen him, author unsuspect, friendly to man, far from deceit or guile. What fear I then? Rather, what know to fear under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death, of law or penalty? Here grows the cure of all, this fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste, of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once both body and mind? So saying, her rash hand in evil hour forth reaching to the fruit she plucked, she ate. Earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat sighing through all her works gave signs of woe, that all was lost. Back to the thicket slunk the guilty serpent, and well might, for Eve, intent now wholly on her taste, naught else regarded. Such delight till then as seemed in fruit she never tasted, whether true or fancied so, through expectation high of knowledge, nor was Godhead from her thought. Greedily she engorged without restraint, and knew not eating death. Satiate at length, and heightened as with wine, jocund and boon, thus to herself she pleasingly began. O sovereign, virtuous, precious of all trees in paradise, of operation blessed to sapience, hitherto obscured, infamed, and thy fair fruit let hang, as to no end created, but henceforth my early care, not without song, each morning and due praise shall tend thee, and the fertile burden ease of thy full branches offered free to all, till dieted by thee I grow mature in knowledge, as the gods who all things know, though others envy what they cannot give. For had the gift been theirs, it had not here thus grown. Experience next to thee I owe, best guide. Not following thee I had remained in ignorance. Thou openst wisdom's way, and givest access, though secret she retire. And I perhaps am secret. Heaven is high, high and remote to see from thence distinct each thing on earth. And other care perhaps may have diverted from continual watch our great forbidding, safe with all his spies about him. But to Adam in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change, and give him to partake full happiness with me? Or rather not, but keep the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner, so to add what wants in female sex, the more to draw his love, and render me more equal, and perhaps a thing not undesirable, sometime superior. For inferior who is free? This may be well, but what if God have seen, and death ensue? Then I shall be no more, and Adam wedded to another Eve shall live with her enjoying, I extinct, a death to think. Confirmed then I resolve, Adam shall share with me in bliss or woe, so dear I love him, that with him all deaths I could endure, without him live no life. So saying, from the tree her steps she turned, but first low reverence done, as to the power that dwelt within, whose presence had infused into the plant sciential sap, derived from nectar, drink of gods. Adam the while, waiting desirous her return, had wove of choicest flowers a garland to adorn her tresses, and her rural labors crown, as reapers oft are wont their harvest crown. Great joy he promised to his thoughts, and new solace in her return so long delayed. Yet oft his heart, divine of something ill, misgave him. He the faltering measure felt, and forth to meet her went, the way she took that morn when first they parted. By the tree of knowledge he must pass. There he her met, scarce from the tree returning, in her hand a bough of fairest fruit that downy smiled, new gathered, and ambrosial smell diffused. To him she hasted, in her face excuse came prologue, and apology to prompt, which with bland words at will she thus addressed. Hast thou not wondered, Adam, at my stay? Thee I have missed, and thought it long deprived thy presence, agony of love till now not felt, nor shall be twice, for never more mean I to try what rash untried I sought, the pain of absence from thy sight. But strange hath been the cause, and wonderful to hear. This tree is not as we are told, a tree of danger tasted, nor to evil unknown opening the way, but of divine effect to open eyes, and make them gods who taste, and hath been tasted such. The serpent, wise or not restrained as we, or not obeying, hath eaten of the fruit, and is become not dead, as we are threatened, but thenceforth endued with human voice and human sense, reasoning to admiration, and with me persuasively hath so prevailed, that I have also tasted, and have also found the effects to correspond. Opener mine eyes, dim erst, dilated spirits, ampler heart, and growing up to Godhead, which for thee chiefly I sought, without thee can despise. For bliss, as thou hast part, to me is bliss, tedious unshared with thee, and odious soon. Thou therefore also taste, that equal lot may join us, equal joy as equal love, lest thou not tasting different degree disjoin us. And I then too late renounce deity for thee, when fate will not permit. Thus Eve with countenance blithe her story told, but in her cheek distemper flushing glowed. On the other side Adam, soon as he heard the fatal trespass done by Eve, amazed, astonied stood and blank, while horror chill ran through his veins, and all his joints relaxed. From his slack hand the garland wreathed for Eve down dropped, and all the faded roses shed. Speechless he stood and pale, till thus at length first to himself he inward silence broke. O fairest of creation, last and best of all God's works, creature in whom excelled whatever can to sight or thought be formed, holy, divine, good, amiable, or sweet. How art thou lost, how on a sudden lost, defaced, deflowered, and now to death devote. Rather, how hast thou yielded to transgress the strict forbiddance, how to violate the sacred fruit forbidden. Some cursed fraud of enemy hath beguiled thee, yet unknown, and me with thee hath ruined. For with thee certain my resolution is to die. How can I live without thee? How forego thy sweet converse, and love so dearly joined, to live again in these wild woods forlorn? Should God create another Eve, and I another rib afford, yet loss of thee would never from my heart. No, no, I feel the link of nature draw me, flesh of flesh, bone of my bone thou art, and from thy state mine never shall be parted, bliss or woe. So having said, as one from sad dismay recomforted, and after thoughts disturbed, submitting to what seemed remedialess, thus in calm mood his words to Eve he turned. Bold deed thou hast presumed, adventurous Eve, and peril great provoked, who thus hath dared, had it been only coveting to eye that sacred fruit, sacred to abstinence, much more to taste it, under ban to touch. But past who can recall, or done undo? Not God omnipotent, nor fate. Yet so perhaps thou shalt not die. Perhaps the fact is not so heinous now, foretasted fruit, profaned first by the serpent, by him first made common and unhallowed ere our taste. Nor yet on him found deadly, he yet lives as thou saidst, and gains to live, as man, higher degree of life. Inducement strong to us, as likely tasting to attain proportional assent, which cannot be but to be gods, or angels, demigods. Nor can I think that God, Creator wise, though threatening, will in earnest so destroy us his prime creatures, dignified so high, set over all his works, which in our fall for us created, needs with us must fail, dependent made. So God shall uncreate, be frustrate, do, undo, and labor lose, not well conceived of God, who, though his power creation could repeat, yet would be loath us to abolish, lest the adversary triumph and say, fickle their state whom God most favors, who can please him long? Me first he ruined, now mankind, whom will he next? Matter of scorn, not to be given the foe. However, I with thee have fixed my lot, certain to undergo like doom. If death consort with thee, death is to me as life. So forcible within my heart I feel the bond of nature draw me to my own in thee. For what thou art is mine. Our state cannot be severed, we are one flesh. To lose thee were to lose myself. So Adam, and thus Eve to him replied, O glorious trial of exceeding love, illustrious evidence, example high, engaging me to emulate, but short of thy perfection, how shall I attain? Adam, from whose dear side I boast me sprung, and gladly of our union hear thee speak, one heart, one soul in both, whereof good proof this day affords, declaring thee resolved, rather than death or aught than death, more dread shall separate us, linked in love so dear, to undergo with me one guilt, one crime, if any be, of tasting this fair fruit, whose virtue, for of good still good proceeds, direct or by occasion, hath presented this happy trial of thy love, which else so eminently never had been known. Were it I thought death menaced would ensue this my attempt, I would sustain alone the worst, and not persuade thee. Rather die deserted than oblige thee with a fact pernicious to thy peace, chiefly assured remarkably so late of thy so true, so faithful love unequalled. But I feel far otherwise the event, not death, but life augmented, opened eyes, new hopes, new joys, tastes so divine, that what of sweet before hath touched my sense, flat seems to this, and harsh. On my experience, Adam, freely taste, and fear of death deliver to the winds. So saying, she embraced him, and for joy tenderly wept, much won that he his love had so ennobled, as of choice to incur divine displeasure for her sake, or death. In recompense, for such compliance bad, such recompense best merits. From the bough she gave him of that fair enticing fruit with liberal hand. He scrupled not to eat against his better knowledge, not deceived, but fondly overcome with female charm. Earth trembled from her entrails, as again in pangs, and nature gave a second groan. Sky lowered, and muttering thunder, some sad drops wept at completing of the mortal sin original. While Adam took no thought, eating his fill, nor Eve to iterate her former trespass feared, the more to soothe him with her love's society, that now as with new wine intoxicated both they swim in mirth, and fancy that they feel divinity within them breeding wings wherewith to scorn the earth. But that false fruit far other operation first displayed, carnal desire inflaming. He on Eve began to cast lascivious eyes, she him as wantonly repaid. In lust they burn, till Adam thus gan Eve to dalliance move. Eve, now I see thou art exact of taste, and elegant, of sapience no small part, since to each meaning savour we apply, and palate call judicious. I the praise yield thee, so well this day thou hast purveyed. Much pleasure we have lost while we abstained from this delightful fruit, nor known till now true relish tasting. If such pleasure be in things to us forbidden, it might be wished for this one tree had been forbidden 10. But come, so well refreshed, now let us play, as meet is, after such delicious fare. For never did thy beauty, since the day I saw thee first and wedded thee, adorned with all perfections, so inflame my sense with ardor to enjoy thee. Fairer now than ever, bounty of this virtuous tree. So said he, and forbore not glance or toy of amorous intent, well understood of Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire. Her hand he seized, and to a shady bank, thick overhead with verdant roof embowered, he led her, nothing loath. Flowers were the couch, pansies and violets and asphodel, and hyacinth, earth's freshest, softest lap. There they their fill of love and love's disport took largely, of their mutual guilt the seal, the solace of their sin, till dewy sleep oppressed them, wearied with their amorous play. Soon as the force of that fallacious fruit that with exhilarating vapor bland about their spirits had played, and inmost powers made was now exhaled, and grosser sleep, bred of unkindly fumes, with conscious dreams encumbered, now had left them, up they rose as from unrest, and each the other viewing, soon found their eyes how opened, and their minds how darkened. Innocence, that as a veil had shadowed them from knowing ill, was gone. Just confidence and native righteousness and honor from about them naked left to guilty shame. He covered, but his robe uncovered more. So rose the Danite strong, Herculean Samson from the harlot lap of Philistine Dalilah, and waked shorn of his strength. They destitute and bare of all their virtue. Silent and in face confounded, long they sat, as struck and mute, till Adam, though not less than Eve abashed, at length gave utterance to these words constrained. O Eve, in evil hour thou didst give ear to that false worm, of whomsoever taught to counterfeit man's voice, true in our fall, false in our promised rising. Since our eyes opened we find indeed, and find we know both good and evil, good lost and evil got. Bad fruit of knowledge, if this be to know, which leaves us naked thus, of honor void, of innocence, of faith, of purity, our wonted ornaments now soiled and stained, and in our faces evident the signs of foul concupiscence, whence evils store. Even shame the last of evils, of the first be sure then. How shall I behold the face henceforth of God or angel, erst with joy and rapture so oft beheld? Those heavenly shapes will dazzle now this earthly, with their blaze insufferably bright. O might I here in solitude live savage, in some glade obscured, where highest woods impenetrable to star or sunlight spread their umbrage broad, and brown as evening. Cover me, ye pines, ye cedars, with innumerable boughs hide me, where I may never see them more. But let us now, as in bad plight, devise what best may for the present serve to hide the parts of each from other, that seem most to shame obnoxious and unseemliest seen. Some tree whose broad smooth leaves, together sewed and girded on our loins, may cover round those middle parts, that this newcomer, shame, there sit not and reproach us as unclean. So counselled he, and both together went into the thickest wood. There soon they chose the fig tree, not that kind for fruit renowned, but such as at this day to Indians known in Malabar or Deccan, spreads her arms branching so broad and long, that in the ground the bended twigs take root, and daughters grow about the mother tree, a pillared shade high overarched, and echoing walks between. There oft the Indian herdsman, shunning heat, shelters in cool, and tends his pasturing herds at loopholes cut through thickest shade. Those leaves they gathered, broad as Amazonian targe, and with what skill they had, together sewed to gird their waist, vain covering if to hide their guilt and dreaded shame. Oh, how unlike to that first naked glory! Such of late Columbus found the American so girt with feathered cincture, naked else and wild among the trees on isles and woody shores. Thus fenced, and as they thought, their shame in part covered, but not at rest or ease of mind, they sat them down to weep. Nor only tears rained at their eyes, but high winds worse within began to rise, high passions, anger, hate, mistrust, suspicion, discord, and shook sore their inward state of mind, calm region once and full of peace, now tossed and turbulent. For understanding ruled not, and the will heard not her lore, both in subjection now to sensual appetite, who from beneath usurping over sovereign reason claimed superior sway. From thus distempered breast, Adam, estranged in look and altered style, speech intermitted thus to Eve renewed. Would thou hadst hearkened to my words, and stayed with me as I besought thee, when that strange desire of wandering this unhappy morn, I know not whence, possessed thee. We had then remained still happy, not as now, despoiled of all our good, shamed, naked, miserable. Let none henceforth seek needless cause to approve the faith they owe. When earnestly they seek such proof, conclude, they then begin to fail. To whom, soon moved with touch of blame, thus Eve, what words have passed thy lips, Adam severe? Imputest thou that to my default, or will of wandering, as thou callest it, which who knows but might as ill have happened, thou being by, or to thyself perhaps? Hadst thou been there, or hear the attempt, thou couldst not have discerned fraud in the serpent, speaking as he spake. No ground of enmity between us known, why he should mean me ill, or seek to harm. Was I to have never parted from thy side, as could have grown there still a lifeless rib? Being as I am, Why didst not thou, the head, command me absolutely not to go, going into such danger as thou saidst? Too facile then, thou didst not much gainsay, nay, didst permit, approve, and fair dismiss. Hadst thou been firm and fixed in thy dissent, neither had I transgressed, nor thou with me. To whom, then first incensed, Adam replied, Is this the love? Is this the recompense of mine to thee, ingrateful Eve, expressed immutable when thou wert lost, not I, who might have lived and enjoyed immortal bliss, yet willingly chose rather death with thee? And am I now upbraided as the cause of thy transgressing? Not enough severe, it seems, in thy restraint. What could I more? I warned thee, I admonished thee, foretold the danger, and the lurking enemy that lay in wait. Beyond this had been force, and force upon free will hath here no place. But confidence then bore thee on, secure either to meet the danger or to find matter of glorious trial. And perhaps I also erred in overmuch admiring what seemed in thee so perfect, that I thought no evil durst attempt thee. But I rue that error now, which is become my crime, and thou the accuser. Thus it shall befall him who to worth in women over-trusting lets her will rule. Restraint she will not brook, and left to herself, if evil thence ensue, she first his weak indulgence will accuse. Thus they in mutual accusation spent the fruitless hours, but neither self-condemning, and of their vain contest appeared no end. End of Book 8, Part 2.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 9, Part 1. The Argument. Man's transgression known, the guardian angels forsake paradise and return up to heaven to approve their vigilance, and are approved, God declaring that the entrance of Satan could not be by them prevented. He sends his Son to judge the transgressors, who descends and gives sentence accordingly, then in pity clothes them both, and reascends. Sin and death, sitting till then at the gates of hell, by wondrous sympathy feeling the success of Satan in this new world, and the sin by man there committed, resolved to sit no longer confined in hell, but to follow Satan, their sire, up to the place of man. To make the way easier from hell to this world, to and fro, they pave a broad highway or bridge over chaos, according to the track that Satan first made. Then, preparing for earth, they meet him, proud of his success, returning to hell, their mutual gratulation. Satan arrives at Pandemonium, in full assembly relates with boasting his success against man. Instead of applause, is entertained with a general hiss by all his audience, transformed with himself also suddenly into serpents, according to his doom given in paradise. Then, deluded with a show of the forbidden tree springing up before them, they greedily reaching to take of the fruit, chew dust and bitter ashes. Meanwhile, the heinous and despiteful act of Satan done in paradise, and how he and the serpent had perverted Eve, her husband, she, to taste the fatal fruit, was known in heaven. For what can scape the eye of God all-seeing, or deceive his heart, omniscient, who in all things, wise and just, hindered not Satan to attempt the mind of man, with strength entire and free will armed, complete to have discovered and repulsed whatever wiles of foe or seeming friend. For still they knew, and ought to have still remembered, the high injunction not to taste that fruit, whoever tempted, which they not obeying, incurred, what could they less? The penalty, and manifold in sin, deserved to fall. Up into heaven from paradise in haste, angelic guards ascended, mute and sad, for man. For of his state by this they knew, much wondering how the subtle fiend had stolen entrance unseen. Soon as th' unwelcome news from earth arrived at heaven gate, displeased all were who heard. Dim sadness did not spare that time celestial visages, yet mixed with pity violated not their bliss. About the new arrived in multitudes, the ethereal people ran to hear and know how all befell. They towards the throne supreme accountable made haste to make appear righteous plea their utmost vigilance, and easily approved when the Most High Eternal Father from his secret cloud amidst in thunder uttered thus his voice: Assembled angels, and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge, be not dismayed nor troubled at these tidings from earth, which your sincerest care could not prevent, foretold so lately what would come to pass when first this tempter crossed the gulf from hell. I told ye then he should prevail and speed on his bad errand. Man should be seduced and flattered out of all, believing lies against his Maker. No decree of mine concurring to necessitate his fall, or touch with lightest moment of impulse his free will, to her own inclining left in even scale. But fallen he is, and now what rests but that the mortal sentence pass of his transgression? Death denounced that day, which he presumes already vain and void, because not yet inflicted, as he feared, by some immediate stroke. But soon shall find forbearance no acquittance ere day end. Justice shall not return as bounty scorned. But whom send I to judge them? Whom but thee, Vice-Regent's son? To thee I have transferred all judgment, whether in heaven or earth or hell. Easy it may be seen that I intend mercy colleague with justice, sending thee, man's friend, his mediator, his design both ransom and redeemer voluntary, and destined man himself to judge man fallen. So spake the Father, and unfolding bright towards the right hand his glory, on the Son blazed forth unclouded deity. He full resplendent, all his Father manifest expressed, and thus divinely answered mild: Father eternal, thine is to decree, mine both in heaven and earth to do thy will supreme, that thou in me, thy Son beloved, mayst ever rest well pleased. I go to judge on earth these thy transgressors, but thou knowest, whoever judged, the worst on me must light, when time shall be, for so I undertook before thee, and not repenting this obtain of right, that I may mitigate their doom on me derived. Yet I shall temper so justice with mercy, as may illustrate most them fully satisfied, and thee appease. Attendants none shall need, nor train, where none are to behold the judgment but the judged, those two. The third best absent is condemned, convict by flight, and rebel to all law. Conviction to the serpent none belongs. Thus saying, from his radiant seat he rose, of high collateral glory, him thrones and powers, princedoms and dominations ministrant, accompanied to heaven gate, from whence Eden and all the coast in prospect lay. Down he descended straight, the speed of gods time counts not, though with the swiftest minutes winged. Now was the sun in western cadence low from noon, and gentle airs, due at their hour to fan the earth, now waked, and usher in the evening cool, when he from wrath more cool came, the mild judge and intercessor both, to sentence man. The voice of God they heard, now walking in the garden, by soft winds brought to their ears. While day declined, they heard, and from his presence hid themselves among the thickest trees, both man and wife, till God, approaching, thus to Adam called aloud: Where art thou, Adam? Wont with joy to meet my coming, seen far off. I miss thee here, not pleased, thus entertained with solitude, where obvious duty erewhile appeared unsought. Or come I less conspicuous? Or what change absents thee? Or what chance detains? Come forth. He came, and with him Eve, more loath, though first to offend, discountenanced both, and discomposed. Love was not in their looks, either to God or to each other, but apparent guilt and shame and perturbation and despair, anger and obstinacy, and hate and guile. Whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief: I heard thee in the garden, and of thy voice, afraid, being naked, hid myself. To whom the gracious judge without revile replied, My voice thou oft hast heard, and hast not feared, but still rejoiced. How is it now become so dreadful to thee, that thou art naked? Who hath told thee? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I gave thee charge thou shouldst not eat? To whom thus Adam sore beset replied, O heaven, in evil strait this day I stand before my judge, either to undergo myself the total crime, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, whose failing, while her faith to me remains, I should conceal, and not expose to blame by my complaint. But strict necessity subdues me, and calamitous constraint, lest on my head both sin and punishment, however insupportable, be all devolved. Though should I hold my peace, yet thou wouldst easily detect what I conceal. This woman, who thou madest to be my help, and gavest me as thy perfect gift, so good, so fit, so acceptable, so divine, that from her hand I could suspect no ill, and what she did, whatever in itself her doing seemed to justify the deed, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. To whom the sovereign presence thus replied, Was she thy God, that her thou didst obey before his voice, or was she made thy guide, superior, or but equal, that to her thou didst resign thy manhood, and the place wherein God set thee above her made of thee, and for thee, whose perfection far excelled hers in all real dignity? Adorned she was indeed, and lovely to attract thy love, not thy subjection, and her gifts were such as under government well seemed unseemly to bear rule, which was thy part and person, hadst thou known thyself aright. So having said, he thus to Eve in fume, Say, woman, what is this which thou hast done? To whom sad Eve, with shame nigh overwhelmed, confessing soon, yet not before her judge, bold or loquacious, thus abashed replied, The serpent me beguiled, and I did eat. Which when the Lord God heard, without delay, to judgment he proceeded on the accused serpent, though brute, unable to transfer the guilt on him who made him instrument of mischief, and polluted from the end of his creation, justly then accursed, as vitiated in nature, more to know concerned not man, since he no further knew, nor altered his offence, yet God at last to Satan first in sin his doom applied, though in mysterious terms, judged as then best, and on the serpent thus his curse let fall. Because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle, each beast of the field. Upon thy belly grovelling thou shalt go, and dust shalt eat all the days of thy life. Between thee and the woman I will put enmity, and between thine and her seed shall bruise thy head, thou bruise his heel. So spake this oracle, then verified, when Jesus, son of Mary, second Eve, saw Satan fall like lightning down from heaven, prince of the air. Then rising from his grave, spoiled principalities and powers, triumphed in open show, and with ascension bright, captivity led captive through the air, the realm itself of Satan long usurped, whom he shall tread at last under our feet, even he who now foretold his fatal bruise, and to the woman thus his sentence turned. Thy sorrow I will greatly multiply by thy conception. Children thou shalt bring in sorrow forth, and to thy husband's will thine shall submit. He over thee shall rule. On Adam last thus judgment he pronounced, Because thou hast hearkened to the voice of thy wife, and eaten of the tree concerning which I charged thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat thereof, cursed is the ground for thy sake. Thou in sorrow shalt eat thereof all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles it shall bring thee forth unbid, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For thou out of the ground wast taken, know thy birth, for dust thou art, and shalt to dust return. So judged he man, both judge and saviour sent, and instant stroke of death denounced that day removed far off. Then pitying how they stood before him naked to the air, that now must suffer change, disdained not to begin thenceforth the form of servant to assume, as when he washed his servants' feet, so now, as father of his family, he clad their nakedness with skins of beasts, or slain, or as the snake with youthful coat repaid, and thought not much to clothe his enemies, nor he their outward only with the skins of beasts, but inward nakedness much more opprobrious, with his robe of righteousness arraying, covered from his father's sight. To him with swift ascent he up-returned, into his blissful bosom reassumed, in glory as of old, to him appeased, all, though all-knowing, what had passed with man recounted, mixing intercession sweet. Meanwhile, ere thus was sinned and judged on earth, within the gates of hell sat sin and death, in counterview within the gates, that now stood open wide, belching outrageous flame far into chaos, since the fiend passed through, sin opening, who thus now to death began. O son, why sit we here each other viewing idly, while Satan our great author thrives in other worlds, and happier seat provides for us, his offspring dear? It cannot be but that success attends him, if mishap ere this he had returned, with fury driven by his avenger, since no place like this can fit his punishment, or their revenge. Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing, and dominion given me large beyond this deep. Whatever draws me on, or sympathy, or some connatural force, powerful at greatest distance to unite with secret amity things of like kind by secretest conveyance, thou, my shade, inseparable must with me along, for death from sin no power can separate. But lest the difficulty of passing back stay his return, perhaps over this gulf, impassable, impervious, let us try adventurous work, yet to thy power and mine not unagreeable, to found a path over this main from hell to that new world where Satan now prevails, a monument of merit high to all the infernal host, easing their passage hence, for intercourse or transmigration, as their lot shall lead. Nor can I miss the way, so strongly drawn by this new-felt attraction and instinct. Whom thus the meagre shadow answered soon, Go, whither fate and inclination strong leads thee. I shall not lag behind, nor err the way, thou leading. Such a scent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savour of death from all things there that live. Nor shall I to the work thou enterprisest be wanting, but afford thee equal aid. So saying with delight he snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth, as when a flock of ravenous fowl, though many a league remote against the day of battle, to a field where armies lie encamped come flying, lured with scent of living carcasses designed for death the following day in bloody fight. So scented the grim feature, and upturned his nostril wide into the murky air, sagacious of his quarry from so far. Then both from out hell gates into the waste wide anarchy of chaos damp and dark flew diverse, and with power, their power was great, hovering upon the waters. What they met, solid or slimy as in a raging sea tossed up and down, together crowded drove from each side, shoaling towards the mouth of hell, as when two polar winds blowing adverse upon the Cronian sea together drive mountains of ice that stop the imagined way beyond Petsora eastward to the rich Cathayan coast. The aggregated soil, death with his mace petrific, cold and dry, as with a trident smote, and fixed as firm as Delos floating once. The rest his look bound with Gorgonian rigour not to move, and with asphaltic slime, broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell the gathered beach they fastened, and the mole immense wrought on over the foaming deep high arched, a bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of this now fenceless world, forfeit to death. From hence a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive down to hell, so if great things to small may be compared, Xerxes, the liberty of Greece to yoke from Susa his Memnonian palace high, came to the sea, and over Hellespont bridging his way, Europe with Asia joined, and scourged with many a stroke th' indignant waves. Now had they brought the work by wondrous art pontifical, a ridge of pendant rock over the vexed abyss, following the track of Satan to the selfsame place where he first lighted from his wing and landed safe from out of chaos to the outside bare of this round world. With pins of adamant and chains they made all fast, too fast they made and durable, and now in little space the confines met of empyrean heaven and of this world, and on the left hand hell with long reach interposed. 3 several ways in sight, to each of these 3 places led, and now their way to earth they had descried, to paradise first tending, when behold, Satan in likeness of an angel bright, betwixt the centaur and the scorpion steering his zenith, while the sun in Aries rose. Disguised he came, but those his children dear, their parents soon discerned, though in disguise. He, after Eve seduced, unminded slunk into the wood fast by, and changing shape to observe the sequel, saw his guileful act by Eve, though all unweeting, seconded upon her husband, saw their shame that sought vain covertures. But when he saw descend the Son of God to judge them, terrified he fled, not hoping to escape, but shun the present, fearing guilty what his wrath might suddenly inflict. That past, returned by night, and listening where the hapless pair sat in their sad discourse and various plaint, thence gathered his own doom, which understood, not instant, but of future time. With joy and tidings fraught, to hell he now returned, and at the brink of chaos, near the foot of this new wondrous pontifice, unhoped, met who to meet him came, his offspring dear. Great joy was at their meeting, and at sight of that stupendous bridge his joy increased. Long he admiring stood, till Sin, his fair enchanting daughter, thus the silence broke. O parent, these are thy magnific deeds, thy trophies, which thou view'st as not thine own. Thou art their author and prime architect. For I no sooner in my heart divined, my heart, which by a secret harmony still moves with thine, joined in connection sweet, that thou on earth hadst prospered, which thy looks now also evidence. But straight I felt, though distant from thee, worlds between, yet felt that I must after thee with this thy son. Such fatal consequence unites us 3. Hell could no longer hold us in her bounds, nor this unvoyageable gulf obscure detain from following thy illustrious track. Thou hast achieved our liberty, confined within hell gates till now, thou us empowered to fortify thus far, and overlay with this portentous bridge the dark abyss. Thine now is all this world, thy virtue hath won what thy hands builded not, thy wisdom gained with odds what war hath lost, and fully avenged our foil in heaven. Here thou shalt monarch reign, there didst not. There let him still victor sway, as battle hath adjudged, from this new world retiring, by his own doom alienated, and henceforth monarchy with thee divide of all things, parted by th' imperial bounds, his quadrature from thy orbicular world, or try thee now, more dangerous to his throne. Whom thus the Prince of Darkness answered glad, Fair daughter, and thou son and grandchild both, high proof ye now have given to be the race of Satan, for I glory in the name, antagonist of heaven's almighty King. Amply have merited of me, of all th' infernal empire, that so near heaven's door, triumphal with triumphal act have met, mine this glorious work, and made one realm, hell and this world, one realm, one continent of easy thoroughfare. Therefore, while I descend through darkness on your road with ease to my associate powers, them to acquaint with these successes, and with them rejoice, you too this way, among those numerous orbs, all yours, right down to paradise descend. There dwell and reign in bliss, thence on the earth dominion exercise, and in the air chiefly on man, sole lord of all declared. Him first make sure your thrall, and lastly kill. My substitutes I send ye, and create plenipotent on earth, of matchless might, issuing from me. On your joint vigour now my hold of this new kingdom all depends, through sin to death exposed by my exploit. If your joint power prevail, the fares of hell no detriment need fear. Go and be strong. So saying, he dismissed them. They with speed their course through thickest constellations held, spreading their bane. The blasted stars looked wan, and planet struck, real eclipse then suffered. The other way Satan went down, the causeway to hell gate. On either side disparted chaos, overbuilt exclaimed, and with rebounding surge the bars assailed, that scorned his indignation. Through the gate, wide open and unguarded, Satan passed, and with all about found desolate, for those appointed to sit there had left their charge, flown to the upper world. The rest were all far to the inland retired, about the walls of Pandemonium, city and proud seat of Lucifer, so by allusion called, of that bright star to Satan paragoned. There kept their watch the legions, while the grand in council sat, solicitous what chance might intercept their emperor sent. So he, departing, gave a command, and they observed. As when the Tartar from his Russian foe by Astrakhan over the snowy plains retires, or Bactrian Sophie from the horns of Turkish Crescent leaves all waste beyond the realm of Aladul in his retreat to Tauris or Casbin. So these, the late heaven-banished host, left desert, utmost hell, many a dark league, reduced in careful watch round their metropolis, and now expecting each hour their great adventurer from the search of foreign worlds, he through the midst unmarked, in show plebeian, angel militant of lowest order, passed, and from the door of that Plutonian hall invisible ascended his high throne, which under state of richest texture spread, at the upper end was placed in regal lustre. Down a while he sat, and round about him saw, unseen. At last, as from a cloud, his fulgent head and shape star bright appeared, or brighter, clad with what permissive glory since his fall was left him, or false glitter. All amazed at that so sudden blaze, the Stygian throng bent their aspect, and whom they wished beheld. Their mighty chief returned. Loud was the claim, forth rushed in haste the great consulting peers, raised from their dark divan, and with like joy congratulant approached him, who with hand silence, and with these words attention won. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, for in possession such, not only of right I call ye, and declare ye now, returned successful beyond hope, to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit, abominable, cursed, the house of woe, and dungeon of our tyrant. Now possess as lords a spacious world, to our native heaven little inferior, by my adventure hard, with peril great achieved. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged unreal vast, unbounded deep, of horrible confusion, over which by sin and death a broad way now is paved, to expedite your glorious march. But I toiled out my uncouth passage, forced to ride the untractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild. The jealous of their secrets fiercely opposed my journey strange, with clamorous uproar, protesting fate supreme. Thence how I found the new created world, which fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful, of absolute perfection, therein man placed in a paradise, by our exile made happy. Him by fraud I have seduced from his creator, and the more to increase your wonder, with an apple. He thereat offended, worth your laughter, hath given up both his beloved man, and all his world to sin and death a prey. And so to us, without our hazard, labour, or alarm, to range in, and to dwell, and over man to rule, as over all he should have ruled. True is, me also he hath judged, or rather me not, but the brute serpent, in whose shape man I have deceived. That which to me belongs is enmity, which he will put between me and mankind. I am to bruise his heel, his seed when is not set, shall bruise my head. A world who would not purchase with a bruise, or much more grievous pain. Ye have the count of my performance. What remains, ye gods, but up and enter now into full bliss? So having said, a while he stood, expecting their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when contrary he hears, on all sides from innumerable tongues, a dismal universal hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more. His visage drawn he felt to sharpen spare, his arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone. Reluctant, but in vain, a greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned, according to his doom. He would have spoke, but hiss for hiss returned, with forked tongue to forked tongue. For now were all transformed alike to serpents, all as accessories to his bold riot. Dreadful was the din of hissing through the hall, thick swarming now with complicated monsters, head and tail, scorpion and asp and amphisbaena dire, Cerastes horned, hydrus and hylops rear, and dipsus, not so thick swarmed once the soil bedropped with blood of Gorgon, or the isle Ophiusa, but still greatest he the midst, now dragon grown, larger than whom the sun engendered in the Pythian vale on slime, huge Python, and his power no less he seemed above the rest still to retain. They all him followed, issuing forth to th'open field, where all yet left of that revolted rout, heaven fallen, in station stood or just array, sublime with expectation, when to see in triumph issuing forth their glorious chief. They saw but other sight instead, a crowd of ugly serpents. Horror on them fell, and horrid sympathy. For what they saw, they felt themselves now changing. Down their arms, down fell both spear and shield, down they as fast, and the dire hiss renewed, and the dire form, caught by contagion, like in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant, turned to exploding hiss, triumph to shame, cast on themselves from their own mouths. There stood a grove hard by, sprung up with this their change, his will who reigns above to aggravate their penance, laden with fair fruit, like that which grew in paradise, the bait of Eve, used by the tempter. On that prospect strange their earnest eyes they fixed, imagining for one forbidden tree a multitude now risen, to work them further woe or shame. Yet parched with scalding thirst and hunger fierce, though to delude them sent, could not abstain, but on they rolled in heaps, and up the trees, climbing, sat thicker than the snaky locks that curled Megaera. Greedily they plucked the fruitage fair to sight, like that which grew near that bituminous lake where Sodom flamed. This more delusive, not the touch but taste deceived, they fondly thinking to allay their appetite with gust, instead of fruit chewed bitter ashes, which the fended taste with spattering noise rejected. Oft they essayed, hunger and thirst constraining, drugged as oft, with hatefullest disrelish writhed their jaws, and soot and cinders filled. So oft they fell into the same illusion, not as man whom they triumphed once lapsed. Thus were they plagued and worn with famine. Long and ceaseless hiss, till their lost shape permitted they resumed, yearly enjoined, some say, to undergo this annual humbling certain numbered days, to dash their pride and joy for man seduce. However, some tradition they dispersed among the heathen of their purchase got, and fabled how the serpent, whom they called Ophion, with Eurynome, the wide encroaching Eve perhaps, had first the rule of high Olympus, thence by Saturn driven, and Ops, ere yet Pictian Jove was born. End of part 1 of book 9. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Paradise Lost by John Milton, Book 9, Part 2. The Argument. The proceedings of sin and death. God foretells the final victory of his Son over them and the renewing of all things, but for the present commands his angels to make several alterations in the heavens and elements. Adam, more and more perceiving his fallen condition, heavily bewails, rejects the condolement of Eve. She persists, and at length appeases him. Then, to evade the curse likely to fall on their offspring, proposes to Adam violent ways, which he approves not, but conceiving better hope, puts her in mind of the late promise made them, that her seed should be revenged on the serpent, and exhorts her with him to seek peace of the offended deity by repentance and supplication. Meanwhile, in paradise, the hellish pair too soon arrived. Sin, there in power before, once actual, now embodied, and to dwell habitual habitant. Behind her death, close following, pace for pace, not mounted yet on his pale horse, to whom sin thus began. Second of Satan sprung, all-conquering Death, what think'st thou of our empire now, though earned with travail difficult? Not better far than still at hell's dark threshold to have sat watch, unnamed, undreaded, and thyself half-starved? Whom thus the sin-born monster answered soon: To me, who with eternal famine pine, alike is hell, or paradise, or heaven, there best, where most with ravin I may meet, which here, though plenteous, all too little seems to stuff this moor, this vast unhidebound corpse. To whom th' incestuous mother thus replied: Thou therefore on these herbs and fruits and flowers feed first, on each beast next, and fish and fowl, no homely morsels, and whatever thing the scythe of time mows down, devour unspared, till I, in man residing through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions, all infect, and season him thy last and sweetest prey. This said, they both betook them several ways, both to destroy, or unimmortal make, all kinds, and for destruction to mature sooner or later, which th' Almighty seeing from his transcendent seat, the saints among, to those bright orders uttered thus his voice: See with what heat these dogs of hell advance, to waste and havoc yonder world, which I, so fair and good, created, and had still kept in that state, had not the folly of man let in these wasteful furies, who impute folly to me. So doth the Prince of Hell and his adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter and possess a place so heavenly, and conniving seem to gratify my scornful enemies, that laugh as if transported with some fit of passion I to them had quitted all, at random yielded up to their misrule, and know not that I called and drew them thither, my hell hounds, to lick up the draught and filth which man's polluting sin with taint hath shed on what was pure, till crammed and gorged, nigh burst with supped and glutted offal, at one sling of thy victorious arm, well-pleasing Son, both sin and death and yawning grave at last, through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell for ever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. Then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure, to sanctity that shall receive no stain, till then the curse pronounced on both precedes. He ended, and the heavenly audience loud sung Hallelujah, as the sound of seas through multitude sung. Just are thy ways, righteous are thy decrees on all thy works. Who can extenuate thee, next to the Son, destined restorer of mankind, by whom new heaven and earth shall to the ages rise, or down from heaven descend? Such was their song, while the Creator, calling forth by name his mighty angels, gave them several charge, assorted best with present things. The sun had first his precept so to move, so shine, as might affect the earth with cold and heat, scarce tolerable, and from the north to call decrepit winter, from the south to bring solstitial summer's heat. To the blank moon her office they prescribed, to th' other five their planetary motions and aspects, in sextile, square, and trine, and opposite, of noxious efficacy, and when to join in synod unbenign, and taught the fixed their influence malignant when to shower, which of them rising with the sun or falling should prove tempestuous. To the winds they set their corners, when with blusters to confound sea, air, and shore, the thunder when to roll with terror through the darker aerial hall. Some say he bid his angels turn askance the poles of earth, twice 10 degrees and more from the sun's axle. They with labour pushed oblique the centric globe. Some say the sun was bid turn reins from the equinoctial road, like distant breadth to Taurus with the 7 Atlantic sisters, and the Spartan twins up to the tropic crab. Thence down amain by Leo and the Virgin and the Scales, as deep as Capricorn, to bring in change of seasons to each clime. Else had the spring perpetual smiled on earth with vernant flowers, equal in days and nights, except to those beyond the polar circles. To them day had unbenighted shone, while the low sun, to recompense his distance, in their sight had rounded still the horizon, and not known of east or west, which had forbid the snow from cold Estoti land, and south as far beneath Magellan. At that tasted fruit the sun, as from Thyestian banquet, turned his course intended. Else how had the world, inhabited, though sinless more than now, avoided pinching cold and scorching heat? These changes in the heavens, though slow, produced like change on sea and land. Sidereal blast, vapour and mist, and exhalation hot, corrupt and pestilent. Now from the north of Norumbega and the Samoyed shore, bursting their brazen dungeon, armed with ice and snow and hail and stormy gust and flaw, Boreas and Caecias and Argestes loud, and Thrascias rend the woods and seas upturn. With adverse blast upturns them from the south Notus and Afer, black with thunderous clouds from Ceraleonia. Thwart of these as fierce, forth rush the Levant and the Ponent winds, Eurus and Zephyr with their lateral noise, Sirocco and Libeco. Thus began outrage from liveless things, but discord first, daughter of sin, among the irrational death introduced through fierce antipathy. Beast now with beast gan war, and fowl with fowl, and fish with fish, to graze the herb, all leaving, devoured each other, nor stood much in awe of man, but fled him, or with countenance grim glared on him passing. These were from without the growing miseries which Adam saw already in part, though hid in gloomiest shade, to sorrow abandoned, but worse felt within, and in a troubled sea of passion tossed, thus to disburden sought with sad complaint. O miserable of happy, is this the end of this new glorious world, and me so late, the glory of that glory, who now become accursed of blessed? Hide me from the face of God, whom to behold was then my height of happiness. Yet well if here would end the misery, I deserved it, and would bear my own deservings, but this will not serve. All that I eat or drink or shall beget is propagated curse. O voice once heard delightfully, increase and multiply, now death to hear. For what can I increase or multiply but curses on my head? Who of all ages to succeed, but feeling the evil on him brought by me, will curse my head? Ill fare our ancestor impure, for this we may thank Adam, but his thanks shall be the execration. So besides mine own that bide upon me, all from me shall with a fierce reflux on me redound, on me as on their natural centre light, heavy though in their place. O fleeting joys of paradise, dear bought with lasting woes! Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me, or here place in this delicious garden? As my will concurred not to my being, it were but right and equal to reduce me to my dust, desirous to resign and render back all I received, unable to perform thy terms too hard, by which I was to hold the good I sought not. To the loss of that sufficient penalty, why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems, yet to say truth, too late I thus contest. Then should have been refused those terms whatever, when they were proposed. Thou didst accept them. Wilt thou enjoy the good, then cavil the conditions? And though God made thee without thy leave, what if thy son proved disobedient, and reproved retort? Wherefore didst thou beget me? I sought it not. Wouldst thou admit for his contempt of thee that proud excuse? Yet him not thy election, but natural necessity begot. God made thee of choice his own, and of his own to serve him. Thy reward was of his grace, thy punishment then justly is at his will. Be it so, for I submit, his doom is fair, that dust I am, and shall to dust return. O welcome hour whenever! Why delays his hand to execute what his decree fixed on this day? Why do I overlive? Why am I mocked with death and lengthened out to deathless pain? How gladly would I meet mortality my sentence, and be earth insensible! How glad would lay me down as in my mother's lap! There I should rest and sleep secure. His dreadful voice no more would thunder in my ears. No fear of worse to me and to my offspring would torment me with cruel expectation. Yet one doubt pursues me still, lest all I cannot die, lest that pure breath of life, the spirit of man, which God inspired, cannot together perish with this corporeal clod. Then in the grave, or in some other dismal place, who knows but I shall die a living death? Oh, thought horrid, if true! Yet why? It was but breath of life that sinned. What dies but what had life in sin? The body properly hath neither. All of me then shall die. Let this appease the doubt, since humane reach no further knows. For though the Lord of all be infinite, is his wrath also? Be it, man is not so, but mortal doomed. How can he exercise wrath without end on man whom death must end? Can he make deathless death? That were to make strange contradiction, which to God himself impossible is held, as argument of weakness, not of power. Will he draw out for anger's sake, finite to infinite in punished man, to satisfy his rigour, satisfied never? That were to extend his sentence beyond dust and nature's law, by which all causes else, according still to the reception of their matter act, not to the extent of their own sphere. But say that death be not one stroke, as I supposed, bereaving sense, but endless misery from this day onward, which I feel begun both in me and without me, and so last to perpetuity. Ay me, that fear comes thundering back with dreadful revolution on my defenceless head. Both death and I am found eternal, and incorporate both. Nor I on my part single, in me all posterity stands cursed. Fair patrimony that I must lead ye sons! Oh, were I able to waste it all myself and leave ye none! So disinherited, how would ye bless me now your curse? Ah, why should all mankind for one man's fault thus guiltless be condemned, if guiltless? But from me what can proceed, but all corrupt, both mind and will depraved, not to do only, but to will the same with me? How can they acquitted stand in sight of God? Him after all disputes forced I absolve. All my evasions vain, and reasonings, though through mazes, leads me still but to my own conviction, first and last on me, me only, as the source and spring of all corruption, all the blame light's due, so might the wrath. Fond wish! Couldst thou support that burden heavier than the earth to bear, than all the world much heavier, though divided with that bad woman? Thus what thou desirest and what thou fearest alike destroys all hope of refuge, and concludes thee miserable beyond all past example in the future, to Satan only like both crime and doom. O conscience, into what abyss of fears and horrors hast thou driven me, out of which I find no way, but deep to deeper plunged? Thus Adam to himself lamented loud through the still night, not now as ere man fell, wholesome and cool and mild, but with black air accompanied with damps and dreadful gloom, which to his evil conscience represented all things with double terror. On the ground outstretched he lay, on the cold ground, and oft cursed his creation, death as oft accused of tardy execution, since denounced the day of his offence. Why comes not death, said he, with one thrice acceptable stroke to end me? Shall truth fail to keep her word, justice divine not hasten to be just? But death comes not at call, justice divine mends not her slowest pace for prayers or cries. O woods, O fountains, hillocks, dales and bowers, with other echo late I taught your shades to answer, and resound far other song. Whom thus afflicted, when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed, but her with stern regard he thus repelled. Out of my sight, thou serpent, that name best befits thee with him leagued, thyself as false and hateful. Nothing wants but that thy shape like his and colour serpentine may show, thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form, pretended to hellish falsehood, snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when least was safe, rejected my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, him overweening to overreach. But with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled by him, thou, I by thee, to trust thee from my side imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assaults, and understood not all was but a show rather than solid virtue, all but a rib, crooked by nature, bent as now appears, more to the part sinister from me drawn, well if thrown out as supernumerary to my just number found. O why did God, Creator wise, that peopled highest heaven with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill the world at once with men as angels without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not then befallen, and more that shall befall, innumerable disturbances on earth, through female snares and strait conjunction with this sex. For either he never shall find out fit mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most shall seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gain by a far worse, or if she love, withheld by parents, or his happiest choice too late shall meet, already linked and wedlock bound to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause to human life and household peace confound. He added not, and from her turn, but Eve, not so repulsed, with tears that ceased not flowing, and tresses all disordered, at his feet fell humble, and embracing them besought his peace, and thus proceeded in her plaint. Forsake me not thus, Adam, witness heaven what love sincere and reverence in my heart I bear thee, and unwitting have offended, unhappily deceived. Thy suppliant I beg, and clasp thy knees, bereave me not whereon I live, thy gentle looks, thy aid, thy counsel in this uttermost distress, my only strength and stay. Forlorn of thee, whither shall I betake me, where subsist? While yet we live, scarce one short hour perhaps between us two, let there be peace, both joining as joined in injuries, one enmity against a foe by doom express assign us, that cruel serpent. On me exercise not thy hatred for this misery befallen, on me already lost, me than thyself more miserable, both have sinned, but thou against God only, I against God and thee, and to the place of judgment will return, there with my cries importune heaven, that all the sentence from thy head removed may light on me, sole cause to thee of all this woe, me only, just object of all his ire. She ended weeping, and her lowly plight immovable, till peace obtained from fault, acknowledged and deplored, in Adam wrought commiseration, Soon his heart relented towards her, his life so late and sole delight, now at his feet submissive in distress, creature so fair, his reconcilement seeking, his counsel whom she had displeased, his aid as one disarmed, his anger all he lost, and thus with peaceful words upraised her soon. Unwary and too desirous, as before so now, of what thou know'st not, who desir'st the punishment all on thyself, alas, bear thine own first, ill able to sustain his full wrath, whose thou feel'st as yet least part, and my displeasure bear'st so ill. If prayers could alter high decrees, I to that place would speed before thee, and be louder heard, that on my head all might be visited, thy frailty and infirmer sex forgiven, to me committed and by me exposed. But rise, let us no more contend or blame each other, blamed enough elsewhere, but strive in offices of love, how we may lighten each other's burden in our share of woe. Since this day's death denounced, if aught I see, will prove no sudden, but a slow paced evil, a long day's dying to augment our pain, and to our seed, old hapless seed, derived. To whom thus Eve, recovering heart, replied, Adam, by sad experiment I know how little weight my words with thee confined, found so erroneous, thence by just event found so unfortunate, nevertheless restored by thee, vile as I am, to place of new acceptance, hopeful to regain thy love, the sole contentment of my heart, living or dying from thee, I will not hide what thoughts in my unquiet breast are risen, tending to some relief of our extremes, or end, though sharp and sad, yet tolerable, as in our evils, and of easier choice, if care of our descent perplex us most, which must be borne to certain woe, devoured by death at last, and miserable it is to be to others cause of misery, our own begotten, and of our loins to bring into this cursed world a woeful race, that after wretched life must be at last food for so foul a monster. In thy power it lies, yet ere conception, to prevent the race unblessed, to being yet unbegot. Childless thou art, childless remain, so death shall be deceived his glut, and with us two be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. But if thou judge it hard and difficult, conversing, looking, loving, to abstain from love's due rites, nuptial embraces sweet, and with desire to languish without hope before the present object languishing, with like desire, which would be misery and torment less than none of what we dread, then both ourselves and seed at once to free from what we fear for both, let us make short, let us seek death, or he not found, supply with our own hands his office on ourselves. Why stand we longer shivering under fears that show no end but death, and have the power of many ways to die, the shortest choosing, destruction with destruction to destroy? She ended here, or vehement despair broke off the rest. So much of death her thoughts had entertained, as dyed her cheeks with pale. But Adam with such counsel nothing swayed, to better hopes his more attentive mind labouring had raised, and thus to Eve replied, Eve, thy contempt of life and pleasure seems to argue in thee something more sublime and excellent than what thy mind condemns. But self-destruction therefore sought refutes that excellence thought in thee, and implies not thy contempt, but anguish and regret for loss of life and pleasure overloved. Or if thou covet death as utmost end of misery, so thinking to evade the penalty pronounced, doubt not but God hath wisely armed his vengeful ire than so to be forestalled. Much more I fear lest death, so snatched, will not exempt us from the pain we are by doom to pay. Rather, such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live. Then let us seek some safer resolution, which methinks I have in view, calling to mind with heed part of our sentence, that thy seed shall bruise the serpent's head. Piteous amends, unless be meant, through my conjecture, our grand foe, Satan, who in the serpent hath contrived against us this deceit. To crush his head would be revenge indeed, which will be lost by death brought on ourselves, or childless days resolved, as thou proposest. So our foe shall scape his punishment ordained, and we instead shall double ours upon our heads. No more be mentioned then of violence against ourselves and wilful barrenness, that cuts us off from hope and savours only rancour and pride, impatience and despite, reluctance against God and his just yoke laid on our necks. Remember with what mild and gracious temper he both heard and judged, without wrath or reviling. We expected immediate dissolution, which we thought was meant by death that day, when lo, to thee pains only in childbearing were foretold, and bringing forth, soon recompensed with joy, fruit of thy womb. On me the curse aslope glanced on the ground, with labour I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse. My labour will sustain me, and lest cold or heat should injure us, his timely care hath unbesought provided, and his hands clothed us unworthy, pitying while he judged. How much more, if we pray him, will his ear be open, and his heart to pity incline, and teach us further by what means to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow, which now the sky with various face begins to show us in this mountain, while the winds blow moist and keen, shattering the graceful locks of these fair spreading trees, which bids us seek some better shroud, some better warmth to cherish our limbs benumbed, ere this diurnal star leave cold the night. How we his gathered beams reflected may with matter sear, foment, or by collision of two bodies grind the air attrite to fire, as late the clouds justling, or pushed with winds, rude in their shock, tine the slant lightning, whose thwart flame driven down kindles the gummy bark of fir or pine, and sends a comfortable heat from far, which might supply the sun. Such fire to use, and what may else be remedy or cure to evils which our own misdeeds have wrought, he will instruct us, praying and of grace beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, sustained by him with many comforts, till we end in dust, our final rest and native home. What better can we do than to the place repairing where he judged us, prostrate fall before him reverent, and there confess humbly our faults, and pardon beg, with tears watering the ground, and with our sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned and humiliation meek. Undoubtedly he will relent and turn from his displeasure, in whose look serene, when angry most he seemed and most severe, what else but favour, grace, and mercy shone. So spake our father penitent, nor Eve felt less remorse. They forthwith to the place repairing, where he judged them, prostrate fell before him reverent, and both confessed humbly their faults, and pardon begged, with tears watering the ground, and with their sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. End of Part 2 of Book 9 of Paradise Lost by John Milton.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Kurt Wong, New York, March 2007. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 10, Part 1. Thus they in lowliest plight repentance did pray, for from the mercy seat above prevenient grace descending had removed the stony from their hearts, and made new flesh regenerate, grow instead. That sighs now breathed another woe, which the spirit of prayer inspired, and winged for heaven with speedier flight than loudest or return. Yet their port, not of mean suitors, nor important less, seemed their petition, than when the ancient pair in fables old, less ancient yet than these, Deucalion and chaste Pyrrha, to restore the race of mankind drowned before the shrine of Themis stood devout. To heaven their prayers flew up, nor missed the way by envious winds blown vagabond or frustrate, In they passed dimensionless through heavenly doors, then clad with incense where the golden altar fumed by their great intercessor came in sight before the Father's throne. Them the glad Son presenting, thus to intercede began. See, Father, what first fruits on earth are sprung from thy implanted grace in man, these sighs and prayers which in this golden censer, mixed with incense, I, thy priest before thee bring. Fruits of more pleasing savour from thy seed, sown with contrition in its heart, than those which his own hand manuring all the trees of paradise could have produced, here fallen from innocence. Now therefore bend thine ear to supplication, hear his sighs though mute. Unskilful with what words to pray, let me interpret for him, me his advocate and propitiation, all his works on me, good or not good, in graft. My merit those shall perfect, and for these my death shall pay. Accept me, and in me from these receive the smell of peace towards mankind. Let him live before thee reconciled, at least his days numbered, though sad, till death. His doom, which I to mitigate thus plead, not to reverse, to better life shall yield him, where with me all my redeemed may dwell in joy and bliss, made one with me as I with thee am one. To whom the Father, without clouds serene, all thy request for man, accepted Son, obtain. All thy request was my decree. But longer in that paradise to dwell, the law I gave to nature him forbids. Those pure immortal elements that no grows, no unharmonious mixture foul, eject him tainted now, and purge him off as a distemper, gross to air as gross, and mortal food, as may dispose him best for dissolution wrought by sin, that first distempered all things, and of corrupted. I at first with two fair gifts created him endowed, with happiness and immortality. That fondly lost, this other served but to eternalize woe. Till I provided death, so death comes his final remedy, and after life tried in sharp tribulation, and refined by faith and faithful works to second life, waked in the renovation of the just, resigns him up with heaven and earth renewed. But let us call to synod all the blessed through heaven's wide bounds. From them I will not hide my judgments, how with mankind I proceed, as now with peccant angels late they saw, and in their state, though firm, stood more confirmed. He ended, and the sun gave signal high to the bright minister that watched. He blew his trumpet, heard in orb since perhaps when God descended, and perhaps once more to sound at general doom. The angelic blast filled all the regions, from their blissful bowers of amaranth and shade, fountain or spring, by the waters of life, where the air they sate in fellowships of joy. The sons of light hasted, resorting to the summons high, and took their seats, till from his throne supreme the Almighty thus pronounced his sovereign will. O sons, like one of us man is become to know both good and evil, since his taste of that defended fruit. But let him boast his knowledge of good lost and evil got. Happier had it sufficed him to have known good by itself and evil not at all. He sorrows now, repents and prays contrite, my motions in him longer than they move. His heart I know, how variable and vain self-love. Least therefore his now bolder hand reach also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever, dream at least to live forever. To remove him I decree, and send him from the garden forth to till the ground whence he was taken, fitter soil. Michael, this my behest have thou in charge. Take to thee from among the cherubim thy choice of flaming warriors, least the fiend, on behalf of man, or to invade vacant possession some new trouble raise. Haste thee, and from the paradise of God, without remorse drive out the sinful pair, from hallowed ground the unholy, and denounce to them and to their progeny from thence perpetual banishment. Yet least they faint at the sad sentence rigorously urged, for I behold them softened and with tears bewailing their excess, all terror hide. If patiently thy bidding they obey, dismiss them not disconsolate. Reveal to Adam what shall come in future days, as I shall be enlightened. Intermix my covenant in the woman's seed renewed. so send them forth, though sorrowing, yet in peace. And on the east side of the garden, place where entrance up from Eden's easiest climbs, cherubic watch, and of a sword the flame wide waving, all approach far off to fright, and guard all passage to the tree of life. Leave paradise a receptacle proof for spirits foul, and all my trees there prey, with whom stolen fruit man once more to be. He ceased, and the archangelic power prepared for swift descent, with him the cohort bright of watchful cherubim. 4 faces each had, like a double Janus, all their shapes spangled with eyes more numerous than those of Argus, and more wakeful than to drowse, charmed with Arcadian pipe, the pastoral reed of Hermes, or his opiate rod. Meanwhile, to resolute the world with sacred light, the Kothia wake, and with fresh dews embalm the earth. When Adam and first matron Eve had ended now their orisons, and found strength added from above, new hope to spring out of despair, joy that would fear yet weep. Which thus to Eve his welcome words renewed. Eve, easily may faith admit that all the good which we enjoy from heaven descends, but that from us aught should ascend to heaven so prevalent as to concern the mind of God high blessed, or to incline his will, hard to belief may seem. Yet this will prayer, or one short sigh of humane breath, upborne even to the seat of God. For since I sought by prayer the offended deity to appease, kneeled and before him humbled all my heart, methought I saw him placable and mild, bending his ear. Persuasion in me grew that I was heard with favor, peace returned home to my breast, and to my memory his promise that thy seed shall bruise our foe, which then not minded in dismay, yet now assures me that the bitterness of death is past, and we shall live. Whence hail to thee, Eve rightly called, mother of all mankind, mother of all things living, since by thee man is to live, and all things live for man. To whom thus Eve, with sad demeanor, ill worthy I such title should belong to me transgressor, who for thee ordained a help, became thy snare. To me reproach rather belongs, distrust and all dispraise. But infinite pardon was my judge, that I who first brought death on all am graced the source of life. Next favorable thou, who highly thus to entitle me vouchsafe, far other name deserving. But the field to labor calls us now with sweat imposed, though after sleepless night, for see the morn, all concerned with our unrest, begins her rosy progress smiling. Let us forth, I never from thy side henceforth astray, where'er our day's work lies, though now enjoined laborious till daydream. While here we dwell, what can be toilsome in these pleasant walks? Here let us live, though in fallen state content. So spake, so wished much humbled Eve, but fate subscribed not. Nature first gave signs impressed on bird, beast, air suddenly eclipsed after short flush of morn. Nigh in her sight the bird of Jove stooped from his airy tomb. 2 birds of gayest plume before him drove. Down from a hill the beast that reigns in woods, first hunter, then pursued a gentle grace, goodliest of all the forest, heart and hind. Direct to the eastern gate was bent their flight. Adam observed, and with his eye the chase pursuing, not unmoved to Eve thus spake. O Eve, some further change awaits us nigh, which heaven by these mute signs in nature shows forerunners of his purpose, or to warn us haply too secure of our discharge from penalty, because from death released some days. How long and what till then our life, who knows? Or more than this, that we are dust, and thither must return and be no more. Why else this double object in our sight of flight pursued in the air and o'er the ground, one way the self-same hour? Why in the east darkness ere day's mid-course, and morning light more orient in yon western cloud that draws o'er the blue firmament a radiant white, and slow descends with something heavenly thought? Ye urge not, For by this the heavenly bands down from the sky of jasper lighted now in paradise, and on a hill made halt. A glorious apparition, had not doubt and carnal fear that day dimmed Adam's eye. Not that more glorious when the angels met Jacob in Mahanaim, where he saw the field pavilion with his guardians bright, nor that which on the flaming mount appeared in Dothan, covered with a camp of fire, against the Syrian king who to surprise one man, assassin-like, had levied war unproclaimed. Princely hierarch in their bright stand there left his powers to seize possession of the gardens. He alone, to find where Adam sheltered, took his way, not unperceived of Adam, who to Eve, while the great visitant approached, thus spake. Eve, now expect great tidings, which perhaps of us will soon determine or impose new laws to be observed. For I descry from yonder blazing cloud that veils the hill one of the heavenly host, and by his gate none of the meanest, some potentate, or of the thrones above. Such majesty invests him coming. Yet not terrible that I should fear, nor sociably mind, as Raphael that I should much confide, but solemn and sublime, whom not to offend, with reverence I must meet, and thou retire. He ended, and the archangel soon drew nigh, not in his shape celestial, but as man, clad to meet man. Over his lucid arms a military vest of purple flowed, livelier than Melibian, or the grain of Sarah, worn by kings and heroes old in time of truce. Iris had dipped the wolf. His starry helm unbuckled shewed him prime in manhood where youth ended. By his side, as in a glistering zodiac hung the sword, Satan's dire dread, and in his hand the spear. Adam bowed low. He kingly from his state inclined not, but his coming thus declared. Adam, heaven's high behest no preface needs. Sufficient that thy prayers are heard, and death then due by sentence when thou didst transgress, defeated of his seizure many days, given thee of grace, wherein thou mayst repent, and one bad act with many deeds well done mayst cover. Well may then thy Lord appeased redeem thee quite from death's rapacious claims, but longer in this paradise to dwell permits not. To remove thee I am come, and send thee from the garden forth to till the ground whence thou wast taken, fitter soil. He added naught, for Adam at the news heart-struck with chilling gripe of sorrow stood, that all his senses bound. Eve, who unseen yet all had heard, with audible lament discovered soon the place of her retire. O unexpected stroke, worse than of death! Must I thus leave thee, paradise? Thus leave thee, native soil, these happy walks and shades, fit haunt of gods, where I had hoped to spend, quiet though sad, the respite of that day, that must be mortal to us both. O flowers that never will in other climate grow, my early visitation and my last at even, which I bred up with tender hand from the first opening bud, and gave ye names, who now shall rear ye to the sun, or rank your tribes, and water from the ambrosial fount. The lastly nuptial bower, by me adorned with what to sight or